Hello all, and welcome to Lorebeards over on the Lawhammer channel for a change. Hi! So as always, if our sound levels are a bit weird, do tell us. That would be lovely.
Okay, we are live. Okay, I confused myself for a second, but that's not unusual. All right. Jesus.
Alrighty, before we begin this week, I have a bit of a disclaimer, a warning. Let's see where this
dire
goes.
prophecy.
A dire prophecy of the end times. Right, so I have opinions, a lot of opinions about the end times. And this entire subject matter is not a short one. Indeed, this entire section covers 5 whole background books, 5 army lists, 5 novels, a bunch of short stories, more White Dwarf articles than you can shake a stick at, and an awful lot of post-chat as what comes next gets built up. This is not something that we can do our normal thing with, which is where we dive in and we go through each one of the events, we explain it, we perhaps recontextualize it, and provide extra detail. We can't do that for this. If we did, we would still be talking about Book 1, Nagash, sometime next year, because there's so much that happens in such a very short space of time. Unlike some other background books where they will spend an awful lot of time detailing one primary conflict, that doesn't happen here. Here, instead, you tend to find that over the course of maybe 2 pages, about 15 to 20 exceedingly important events occur in short order. And because of that, trying to talk through all of those, you could easily just spend an entire stream discussing just the intro pages in the Nagash book. And we'd be quite happy because, as we all know, good old Sotek and I can talk for hours about the ramifications of different individual pieces of lore detail. So for this stream, we're not going to be doing the normal deep dive. Instead, it's going to be a lot more umbrella. The end times as a whole, discussing some individual parts, which to a degree works because the end times books often focus on individual battles for quite a bit because they're supporting the army lists that they're building. And a lot of those battles are actually, in the greater scheme of the end times, kind of unimportant. They don't actually bring anything that important to the table. All they do is they develop one particular battle with some new characters that have been added and then are discarded because half of them die. So be aware we won't be doing our normal thing. My second disclaimer is, as I said, I have a lot of opinions. Some years ago, I used to work for Games Workshop. The first time I worked for Games Workshop, I was working in the retail stores, eventually up to being a manager. It was my job to effectively look at every single piece of output from Games Workshop and say, this is the cool new thing, this is what it does, how excited are we? And I'm kind of pre-programmed with that. Everything that is released, I kind of get excited by. I can't help it. I used to do it for years. It was my job. Plus, I always, then as I moved on to other jobs with Games Workshop, I was writing about them and doing cool things with them. So that also brought a great deal of excitement. The End Times is a completely different package. This was pitched as pretty much the crowning moment for the Warhammer world. 30 years worth of lore development finally coming to an end. This was the conclusion. This is not something new to fiction, to games, or anything. All things come to an end. But this was pitched as pretty much, if you're a fan of Warhammer, buy this because it's all coming to an end. It's our great hurrah. It's our great celebration of all things Warhammer. It is everything that's going to make all the fans go, yay! We're super sad that it's coming to an end, but look how awesome it is to see all of the characters we love, all of the realms we love, finally getting the time that they need to shine and then go boom. Now,
so that was a lie.
I'm not against the concept of the end times. In fact, I kind of love it. I've blown up the Warhammer world for my own games more times than anyone out there needs to know. I love the idea. But the execution, now that's where it gets a bit important. Now, as I said, I used to work for Games Workshop. My first desire is to spin positive. The execution here reminds me of the execution of many storylines that people have attempted to end, but done it, shall we say, a little bit too rushed, or without any great thought, or with changing thoughts as time progresses. Take, for example, Star Wars and the sequel films. Suddenly, Palpatine returns. And we can say that for half of the Warhammer characters during the end times. Or alternatively, the Game of Thrones, which built up over the course of multiple books and then blew up at the end as they forgot what the entire world building had been building towards. And they just had a bunch of events that they had to get out. You're going to see a lot of that in the end times as well. Indeed, if we look at most of the series of late that have come to great conclusions, many of them haven't pinned the landing. They have gone running up towards the vaulting horse as an athlete. They've got all of the weight of years of world building behind them. They launch into the air and then they go, fuck it, I don't care anymore. And they land on their head. And for me, that's the end times. Prepare for some neck breaking, as I will find it very difficult not to tear into it. So if you're someone that looks for only positivity in the course of your Warhammer streams, I'm warning you now, it's going to be very hard for me to maintain that positivity. Rant over.
Yeah, fair. Yes, and I just want to add that, like Andy said, there's going to be a lot of energized negativity, would probably be the best way to call it, in this stream. So it's going to be a Nerd Rage stream. If you find Nerd Rage annoying, probably not the stream for you. That's okay. We'll catch you next time. But that being said, we are going to focus on like things that we think would have been cool, or some ideas that were introduced that were awesome, or little nuggets of gold that kind of survived amidst the crashing and burning. But some other things I want to add is just that I do want to make it clear that like a lot of people, especially because there's kind of been memes about it since the end times happened. And like the end times suffered from a couple of really notable things that we're not going to be focusing on much, because we're going to be focusing more about like the story and stuff of
Content.
that. It's always important to remember that the end times was, while it may have been advertised as a celebration of Warhammer Fantasy, it wasn't. It was a marketing scheme for set up for a new setting, being Age of Sigmar, which hilariously backfired on multiple levels. And Age of Sigmar was hot trash when it started, and eventually they figured out how to make it good. Thanks to mostly changing a lot of who was in control of what was going on, and a lot of the people that made decisions for the end times leaving the company, which magically solved a lot of problems. But like I said, we're not going to be focusing on that as much. Like we're not going to be focusing on a lot of the business aspects of it. We're just going to be trying to focus on the stories they told, and what parts we didn't like, which is a lot of it, what parts we did like, which is not quite as much, and then maybe inserting some of our own little ideas and fan theories in there. So with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and start with that super chat.
Thanks very much, Sean. I'm going to bring up a couple of comments about Gelt as we go, because there's a couple of story beats here where I'm going to be going, oh bullshit, oh shit. I'm finding it very difficult, very difficult to maintain any level of, let's say, respectable commentary. But I think, just as a general foreshadowing, we'll be discussing Gelt at points almost certainly, but I don't think I will go in depth into why I despise that walking gold mess to any great degree, because we could probably do that in a Gelt stream. But you're almost certainly to hear some of the reasons why. Oh man, it's definitely going to come up at some point.
All right, so enough beating around the bush. Let's get into the end times. So I think probably the best thing to do is I'm going to give like genuinely a minute long explanation of a couple of major events, and then we're just going to jump into the ones that we find the most interesting. To summarize the end times, it takes place over, I want to say it takes place over the course of about
a decade.
Yeah, it's about 10 years.
Yeah, about 10 years.
And basically the end times starts with Skaven appear all over the world, and they wipe out everyone that's not a main character. I
mean, start as you intend to continue.
Yeah, that's literally the way it starts. There is a prequel of Talea, Estalia, Araby, the Border Princes, everyone we don't want to talk about just dies instantly. Yeah. The end. That alone is kind of a lot. Yeah, so Skaven show up everywhere. They kill everyone that's not important. Everyone that is important miraculously survives the Skaven invasion, and the Skaven kind of peter themselves out. And then Somehow Nagash returned.
Then
Nagash. yeah. So then Nagash happens.
Nagash.
Which is already skipping a massive amount because that's how crazy the end times are. Because like the entire first book is just building up to Nagash coming back. But like the Auric Bastion is made, which is a big magical barrier that separates.
Gelt's raising his head already. My face is getting redder.
Yeah. So I think we'll just tackle one book at a time. So let's start with Nagash. The major events being the Skaven invasion, all the shenanigans involving Sylvania getting cordoned off, and then Chaos getting cordoned off, and then Nagash comes back, and then we get the big war between Nagash and the Tomb Kings. The end.
Yeah.
That's the first book.
Controversially, I think that the Nagash book was definitely attempting to tell a story, and it had a clear idea in mind. I'll say one thing before we head into anything else, because I'd like to start with some strong positivity. The art here and throughout the end times deserves some fucking calling out.
Their artists came out big time.
Oh yeah. They nailed it. They clearly were given a nice broad brief, and they went to town on these books. They are often gorgeous. We're getting access to pictures of characters that we haven't seen for a long time, reimagined. The rebuild of Nagash is gorgeous. In fact, just in general, the art throughout is lovely.
The art, and I'll say the minis as well. The miniatures were absolutely gorgeous. Like they were kind of the start of the new class of minis that Age of Sigmar uses, and I will fight anybody that thinks those models are not beautiful.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I remember when they came out, they were almost to a degree a balance to what I was, when we read the Nagash book for the first time, already some skepticism and doubts, largely because the style of the writing was often so fast, involving so many events occurring in such a small period of time in the background or off camera, in a fashion that made you go, why did this happen? How did this happen? Why is this character doing this? This seems against their nature. Why is this character doing this? This seems against their nature. And we've reached a conclusion, fair enough, but there's so many questions that have been raised. And by the end of the book, I just had this sort of knowing feeling that none of those answers would come, and that I would be left going, this isn't a celebration of the last 30 years of lore. This is someone driving towards some stories that they're desperate to conclude. And it was already beginning to show. I didn't realize that it was going to get much worse with the later books.
Yeah,
much worse.
Nagash was easily the best book of the five.
Definitely.
They were certainly not all equal, I will say. But Nagash is I believe it's the second largest of the entire.
Huge. I've got it over there. I've got so many other books.
I've got but it's like
books.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it was the second largest, if not the largest.
It's the largest.
Yeah, it is a huge book and
proper big.
Yeah, and the thing that Nagash did that was nice that none of the other books did, except for I guess you could argue Archaon technically, is that Nagash did touch on everybody. Every single playable faction in the game got at least a little bit of stuff. Even the ogres got a little bit of stuff, which is the only time they get mentioned in the entirety of the end times. They got a 2-page spread, and that was it.
They got a whole 2 pages.
Yeah,
to a degree, though, this is where things begin to also sort of fall apart, but not really. And I'll explain what I mean here. In Nagash, everybody gets their moment in the sun. Just even if it's only for a couple of pages, you get a lovely setup for how everything's going. And then you get the next development, which is the step into what is going to bring Nagash about. And that's where it starts to make you go, wait, what now? As Nagash is gathering various great important, well, not Nagash, Manfred, is gathering various great important things and great important people, all of whom represent something relatively ill-defined, but they're demigods or they're whatever. So we've got characters like Morgiana Le Fay somehow falling into Manfred's hands.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
okay.
That's
okay. Well, let's just technically
I'll back off on that one.
Holy Artist did a bit thing. I just want to point out so we can grab that. Can I tell you if they're going to are they going to redo the end times, seeing as everything is so different now? I don't know if Games Workshop ever is going to want to touch it ever again. Like I could see for them, they could see it as just it's a no-win scenario, so why bother with it? Just say that it happened and then move on with their lives. I would love to see them take another stab at it, but not for quite some time.
Yeah, I'd like to see a Horus Heresy redo.
Yeah, that's how I feel about it as well. Like a Horus Heresy redo where they're like, at the end, the world still blows up, but we're gonna redetail everything. I think could be a lot of fun, but I would do it after they do whatever
it makes sense of it all. Like, for example, I'll just give you a single example. I don't want to drill into all the details because we'll be stuck on the gash for freaking ever. But I'm going to give you one example of where they've got a story which could be extraordinary, but the lack of detail means that you're just left asking questions. So apparently, the Everqueen has a kid with Tyrion that everyone believes is the kid of the Phoenix King, and this is the Everchild. Now, the Everchild, bless her little soul, is super important for the spell that Manfred wants to do for reasons that are kind of unspecified. Now, this all sounds relatively fine. It gives Tyrion some motivation to go charging after his daughter and find reason to be dealing with Manfred and the Gash directly. So you can see why they're doing that and creating those ties. They're trying to get the individual factions who may otherwise never talk or meet together. So that's why there's these requirements for the ritual to bring back the Gash, who is, by the way, in the background before the end times, already back. But let's push that aside.
No, he's not. No, he's not.
So if they'd been properly celebrating Warhammer, they simply would have said he was in a weakened state in the Black Pyramid and he'd been influencing undead across the world, including Manfred, one of his greatest, most intelligent examples. And he was using Manfred to try and gather all of his stuff and bring him back to his full power again. But they didn't do that. He was just out of it and they were just bringing him back.
Yeah.
So anyway, this character, the second you think on her for any length of time, you realize it's bullshit. And I'll explain why. So Finubar, the Phoenix King, gets with the Everqueen upon ascending to the throne. So he passes through the flame, and regardless of what happens with the whole flame later, and exactly what happens for the Phoenix King in general, they have a kid. That's what they do. This is a massive spiritual event for the elves, because this is the joining of Azurin, the representation of the Phoenix King, with Isha, who's represented through the Everqueen. And they have a child who will become the next Everqueen. This child is enormously important, and culturally so. But in this case, apparently Tyrion slipped in. Now, why is that nonsense? I shall tell you. When Finubar raised to the throne, Tyrion was 6.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if you know when elves reach sexual maturity, but I'm guessing it's not 6 or 7.
They don't just come out fully formed?
Apparently not. So Tyrion, who is already super young when the Great War Against Chaos 2302, 2003-ish is around. He's only like 50, 60 odd at that point. Tyrion and Teclis are enormously young. Far too young for what they eventually do during that war, because when they were first written, elves were different. And their age didn't matter quite in the way that it does today. They were children. But anyway, that doesn't matter. We've got a character.
I do have a follow-up question to that, though, because
I'll finish my point and then jump in
okay,
because it's really short. So we've got a character who's super important for the plot, who makes no sense. All it takes is a single line saying something like, the Everqueen and Phoenix King kid died during the Great War Against Chaos, was murdered as Chaos swept through during the last incursion. And a new child, obviously, was required. So the Phoenix King and the Everqueen got together again. And that is where Tyrion slipped in. They could easily have made a story that made sense and immediately created this horrible triangle that was going to cause the downfall of the elves in this particular area. It would have been a story of passion and horror. But they didn't. They just didn't. They just had a kid that just popped up from nowhere that got created for the deed of the day and sort of doesn't make sense when you look at the lore with any depth.
So I know they didn't do this because if they would have brought it up. But this does actually just spawn a random. This is completely unrelated because once again they didn't do this, but it spawns a question I actually have in my head now of when Finubar ascends the throne, presumably because Tyrion and Teclis were so young, then Alariel was also very young. So shouldn't he have had a kid with her mom who should have been the Everqueen at that time?
So we have a massive problem with the Everqueen in general because nobody sat down and realized that they changed the nature of how the Everqueens worked by the way that they wrote the Phoenix Kings, which means that when a new Phoenix King comes along, they pop over to the Everqueen and have a kid. And presumably, although it's never properly written, the old Everqueen steps down and a new one steps up because that would be the only thing that makes sense. But that's not confirmed. So the answer is we don't know because it was never properly written.
So honestly, if they had written it right, Cinnabar probably would have been Alariel's dad. That's what it probably should have been.
Well, yes, possibly that's the case. Or alternatively, Alariel and Finubar would have been the mating pair because the other Everqueen stepped down and was still alive, and they made a new kid who would have been the next Everqueen. Anyway, there's also
it doesn't matter. So
super chat there. Everchild, did Archeon and Alariel bang? And indeed, Hammond. I think there's a certain amount of that. They could have gone for a different name because they already had the Ever Queen, and the idea was that the Ever Queen had a kid who became the Ever Child. It's a bad piece of naming, and it's not just bad because the name sounds a bit crap, Ever Child, but it's also something that will become the case throughout the course of, I would argue, the end times, and then to a degree into Age of Sigmar, where they just start randomly pulling words and throwing them together just because they're possibly related to something else, and some of the names come out just sounding, well, I mean, I don't want to be too negative, but just not very
Thank you, Hammond. I look forward to reading your fan fiction about stuff. Anyway, so
slash fan.
Yeah. So something that occurred to me when Andy was talking about it, especially when he brought up the Fey Enchantress, is that so the End Times has another caveat that you kind of have to look at, which is that a lot of things happened technically in 8th edition at the very end of the army books that are technically about the end times, and it was really dumb of them not to just include them in the end times, because otherwise you could be completely lost when picking up those books. Of like the Fey Enchantress gets kidnapped. So the Wood Elf book had to cover a lot of ground because Games Workshop didn't want to finish 8th edition. Because they wanted to hurry up and rush into the end times. So 3 factions did not get 8th edition books, which were the Beastmen, the Skaven, and Bretonnia. This was really bad for all of them. This was especially bad for Bretonnia because they didn't even get a 7th edition book.
Yep.
So because of this, Games Workshop had to kind of speed run Bretonnia in the Wood Elf book. So the Wood Elf book has a ton of lore, and a lot of the lore in their book is about Bretonnia. Which causes a whole bunch of messes that we're actually going to touch on a little bit. But one of the messes that it does is that basically the Wood Elves get dragged into the Bretonnian Civil War of Malabad becomes the Black Serpent, and he initiates the Civil War, which is a good storyline. That's a storyline that's been introduced ages ago, back in the Sons of the Grail, Knights of Bretonnia, whatever that book was called. During the initial battle, all we get is that Drycha apparently shows up to fight alongside the Wood Elves and Bretonnia, and somehow Drycha manages to kidnap the Fey Enchantress without anybody noticing after the battle is over.
Oh no.
Which does not make any goddamn sense if you know anything about anything. Because, like, the Fey Enchantress would have been surrounded by knights, presumably, and the Wood Elves would have been like, hey, someone keep an eye on Drycha. She's kind of undependable. And anyway, so...
And if you go into any depth with the lore as it was being built, even at that point, they were kind of on the same side anyway.
Oh, yeah, no, except for not because of what we're going to get into in a minute, which is crazy. So, anyway, so that's how the Fey Enchantress ends up going to Manfred, is that Drycha kidnaps her and trades her to Manfred for... So it has to do with like her breaking Coadil's prison open. And anyway, so, and that's not even touching on like the person that got to write that, which once again, I say this every time I talk about the end times. I am going to shit on the writing. Please don't take it as a personal attack on the authors, like as human beings. I'm gonna say some things that like, it's going to sound very mean, but it's about like the story and the writing. It's not an attack on them as a person. I'd love to have them over for dinner and treat them to some Texas barbecue. That being said, Josh Reynolds, what the fuck? Of that, like, the Fey Enchantress, according to all of the lore before the end times, very clearly establishes that she is an elf.
Yep.
The end times ignores all of that and makes her into a human because they didn't read. That's literally the only explanation.
Yep.
And she gets turned into a...
Just look at the bloody model that they had at the time. It was an elf.
Yeah, and she gets turned into a vampire, which, like... So anyway, so that happened. We also have other... Yes, thank you. Jesus. Trying to opening up just a bread ball.
Baguettes.
So... honestly, I think this is going to be funnier than I initially thought it was, just because it's
this is going to be a funny stream.
But and so that we have that initial setup, and then we have Sigmar's Blood, which is a prequel campaign book that came out before the end times. That was a baby book of Manfred von Karstein versus Volkmar the Grim. And if you don't read that book, you're going to have no fucking idea what's going on with Sylvania at the start of Nagash, because that book establishes that Manfred von Karstein publicly reveals that he's back by killing the witch hunter, I think von Getzt or Vengetz or something like that, drops him through the ceiling and on the the Grand Diet of Reichland while they're all chatting, and Volkmar's like, all right, fuck this, I'm going to war with Sylvania, and nobody helps him, which, like, what? Volkmar goes by himself to Sylvania.
It's a proper crazy storyline to begin with, and it's almost like someone in the studio hates him, because for those who've seen the previous Storm of Chaos campaign, Volkmar was equally the repository of stupid ideas. Chaos are coming on a spring drive into Kislev, eh? Well, I'm gonna go. Come help me. Yeah, nah, Volkmar. What do you mean, no? I'm the Grand Theogenes, supposedly the most powerful figure in all the Empire. Yeah, no, not at all. He just marches off by himself, gets grabbed by Be'lakor, killed, popped up on a banner, resurrected, and then marched around like, hey, look who we've got on our banner. They clearly hate him, and the decisions that are made in Sigmar's Blood are, if anything, just another step. Admittedly, a complete rewrite, because the Storm of Chaos was pushed aside, and this is a new version of the Storm of Chaos, with events occurring in the same loose timeline. But my goodness, there's some pretty daft choices for the poor chap in there.
Yeah, so Volkmar watches off, and he almost wins until Gelt happens. Manfred technically wins. Manfred pulls off a ritual that we're going to discuss in a minute, because it's actually interesting. But basically, Volkmar is winning functionally until the very end, where Manfred pulls off his ultimate scheme, which is that he unleashes a big nasty ritual that basically turns Sylvania into a dead zone for faith. So he unleashes a really powerful necromantic ritual using the 9 books of Nagash and a bunch of artifacts that he has acquired that makes it where faith does not work in Sylvania.
That's super interesting. I like that as an idea.
Functionally, what he did, based on other older conversations we've had with Andy here on Lorebeards, is that he basically found a way to make it where Hish cannot penetrate Sylvania. Which, very cool. Genuinely super a cool idea. Like, Volkmar calls upon his faith and nothing happens. And with his faith gone, he's an old man. Like, he's got nothing. And he gets caught. Now, that's genuinely very interesting. One of my favorite parts of the end times. Not my favorite part, but one of my favorite parts, because it's like, that makes sense. I could see Manfred pulling that off.
And it completely fits with his character as well, because he is ultimately, when you get past everything that the character could be, a wizard. He's a really powerful, knowledgeable wizard, arguably one of the best in the world. You can bring out Nagash, who is akin to a god anyway, but we've got ourselves the perfect person to do this job, doing the job. It's an example of characters who are long established doing what that character would do, and something that I think is a celebration of the character rather than just, we have characters we need to resolve plot for, let's make this character do it.
Yeah, that being said, and I will say Sigmar's that's exactly what happened. Yeah, that's Manfred to a T, to be honest.
It pretty much is.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got to remember that the undead have nothing but contempt for the chaos gods that lie beyond, in the aether, somewhere that they themselves are completely cut off from. They use the magic that seeps into the material realm. They themselves are largely material creatures. So yeah, 100%.
Yeah, in case no one's ever
You're
seen it
a
before,
loser.
Sigmar's Blood, very tiny book.
It's a small book.
Also, fun fact: this is what Helman Gorst is from. The very first Warhammer DLC, because Games Workshop did not care about Total War Warhammer at all when it started. The very first DLC they ever did was this.
Yeah.
Because all of the regiments of renown from the first pack are in this book. And so what was unique about this book was that it was kind of like a starter set for the end times, in that you were able to basically buy a very small selection of minis, and all of the minis participated in the battles. And like that's why but like to set up for the end times, it just made no sense, because like the goal was to set up for new players getting into Warhammer right before they blew it up, which was super shitty on their part, but hey, business. And so the reason Volkmar is by himself is because they wanted you to only use the minis you would buy for this book. So it's a mess.
It's pretty dumb, actually. And I love the whole setup. I love everything it was attempting to do. But when you actually thought about it in context of the characters making choices themselves, you're repeatedly left going with a, why the fuck are they doing that? That makes no actual sense in practice. But nevertheless, the story they were attempting to tell was still pretty damn decent.
Yeah. So anyway, Manfred's ritual, awesome. Like, we're honestly starting off on a cool foot. Also, like, Volkmar doesn't die in the book; he's captured. Oh, that could go somewhere really interesting. What's Manfred gonna do to him? Is he gonna escape? Is Karl Franz gonna go, oh shit, they captured the Grand Theognis? We should probably do something. Spoiler: nobody cares apparently.
Most powerful figure who represents Sigmar. What do we do? I think whatever.
Yeah, the most powerful cult in that part of the world, and everyone's like, it's fine. But so the book ends with Gelt countering Manfred's spell, which is that Gelt unleashes a different spell that creates a barrier of light around Sylvania's borders. So basically, where Manfred makes it where nobody of faith can use their magic in Sylvania, and the things that hurt the undead the most cannot manifest in Sylvania, it gets somehow Uno reverse carded into, okay, well, the undead can't leave Sylvania, so suck on that.
This is when the bullshit begins.
Yes. Now, the only thing that I give a slight modicum of credit to is that it wasn't Gelt's idea. A Lamian vampire.
But whose was it?
Yeah. So Neferata is doing Neferata things, and to be fair, I still think this is within making sense for the character of that. Neferata does not want Nagash to come back. That is something that she has always been against. So when she sees what Manfred's up to, she knows that this will eventually lead to Nagash returning. So she tells Gelt, yeah, that's literally just the end times in a nutshell. Just replace it with like a bunch of different words we're gonna say. So she sends an agent to Gelt that tells him, you should cast this really big ritual. And Gelt goes, all right.
There is a retelling of that story in the end times where it wasn't that at all. What it was actually was an apprentice, a random apprentice, who pops up and says, hey, Gelt, guess what? Here's a really cool ritual what you could do, but actually, it was the changeling.
Yes. Now, the changeling.
I mean,
all
right to both of those stories, and both of those stories bring something to the table because they sort of make sense. Chaos trying to, for example, hold Manfred down and pin him into place, or alternatively, Neferata trying to ensure that Nagash is not brought back. There are reasons here. What doesn't make sense is that Gelt is a freaking gold wizard. The way that he does the ritual is to take all of the artifacts which have been turfed out of Sylvania and have formed a ring around Sylvania already, because everybody that had an artifact, all the ghouls that were underneath Manfred's command, were sent out to collect them and turf them out of Sylvania. So we've got a ring of artifacts around just handily there. And then somehow all of these religious artifacts, not magical artifacts, religious ones, are turned into a spell by a gold wizard that can somehow do an almost continent-wide barrier. It's one gigantic piece of not just bullshit, but a complete lack of understanding of how the magic in the Warhammer world works. You're mixing theological with magical and not using the correct bridge. The correct bridge is not Gelt, it's the Patriarch of the Light Order. Yep. That is who should have stepped in. There should have been choruses. We're talking hundreds and hundreds of light wizards and apprentices coming out to support what would have been an enormous ritual, and the cult of Sigmar should have been involved, trying to reclaim their, well, they're missing. And who cares about that guy, Grand Theogenes?
Well, and every cult, like, you know, like there's a huge Tallite artifact that's stolen by Drycha that plays a key role in
an enormous one. I mean, this whole thing is such an enormous event, but it's played so small and low key, and then all the credit given to Gelt for reasons that make
I will say, presumably,
no real sense.
Yeah, presumably Gelt did not do it himself, but there was no reason for them not to like elaborate on what happened instead of just like being like
3 sentences rather than Gelt did, because it says repeitedly Gelt did this ritual, Gelt did this ritual, Gelt did this ritual, and then later on Gelt uses what he learns from this to do what we'd argue an even bigger bullshit ritual.
I will say, with the exception of one particular storyline, Gelt is one of the characters that gets heavily maligned by the end times. And there are a couple characters we'll touch on who get really fucked. Like Manfred starts off great, but he gets one of the biggest fucking mischaracterizations near the end, which a lot of people hate him for, which is not fair because that wasn't consistent with the character. By the way, Holy Artist, thank you for the bits. Could it be that to do
ranting?
It was earlier at 10:30. If you want to go by timestamp,
I'll go grab it
so we can answer that.
It is.
But could it be that to do GW and CA are British? They won't. So you're
really.
It's like GW genuinely. It was just they were rushed. That's all there is. They were rushed.
I'll also add that for all it's very easy to say that the Bretonians are French, they're really not. They're Arthurian knights who may have been inspired by French, but they're super English.
They speak French and they have French accents, and that's literally as far as it goes.
Yeah, pretty much.
They're far more Arthurian than they are French. But in any event, so that's just prequel to the end time stuff. Just to show how like messy and crazy all this shit gets. The whole thing with the Everchild is technically pre-end times. Yeah. Where like her whole getting captured thing happens before the end time starts. Of like she gets kidnapped while she's with which like that whole storyline, there are parts of it that are fun, but the rest of it is so bizarre of like another example of like the writing not making any sense is that according to the 8th edition army books, the Everchild is sent as an ambassador to Karazakarak in the Everpeak. And she's sent with like a really powerful little contingent. They get to Karazakarak, and then Manfred and Kimmler team up to capture her. Now, they don't attack her before she gets to Karazakarak, where, she'd have a smaller entourage. They purposely wait until she's leaving Karazakarak with a giant dwarf entourage, and the two of them with their magic pretty much single-handedly, although granted, the scheme that they pull off to get the Everchild, I enjoyed immensely. It's a really fun battle. They manipulate orcs into attacking them. It's a lot of fun. It's actually a fun story. But they capture her, and this is where the story gets stupid, is that Manfred takes her to Nagashazar.
Whoa.
Now, here's the thing. Nagashazar is not an empty ruin. It is a very busy place where some really scary fucking shit lives. That even Manfred would, like, in all of his power, would be a little hesitant about going there idly. He takes the Everchild there, and you may think to yourself, he must be taking her there for some grand ritual purpose. Nope, turns out has nothing to do with his plan at all. He doesn't do anything at Nagashazar. He literally takes her there, and the elves and the dwarves team up, and they go to Nagashazar, which really should have been like a whole thing, but it's literally just a note in their timelines, which is like fucking crazy, because the siege of Nagashazar should have been huge.
It's potentially one of the most important events that just wasn't touched on, and it's mental. I'm going to give a clean example of that. Many of you out there will immediately go, "Oh, I see." This is us building up towards the story, and we're not even really touched the end times as they come.
Nope.
But the end times is a set of movies. And I did say movies because that's somehow how they feel like a bad set of prequels.
Yeah.
These feel like, in many respects, like say the Clone Wars set of prequels, in that there was loads of good ideas in there, but it was so terribly executed that everybody looked at the prequel set of movies and went, yeah, nah, but I see what you're trying to do there. But later on, other people came in and did, say, for example, the Clone Wars series, and all the depth was added. All of the weird bits were looked at and redone. And that's what this needs. It needs somebody to say, well, that makes no sense and that makes no sense. Why don't we just reimagine that? And to a degree, they sort of did, because if you take a look at the novels that are to come, they also completely contradict everything that's inside the main end times.
So just to reiterate about how crazy we're talking here, a prequel event features a massive army of elves, high elves from Ulthuan, led by Tyrion himself, to rescue his daughter, teams up side by side with an army of dwarfs from Kanazakarek, led by High King Thorgrim Grudgebearer himself.
This is Elgay business. Yeah. What?
Laying siege to Nagashazar together,
fighting Elgay.
Yeah,
but he does.
Fighting Manfred von Karstein, and that
Whatever
is not covered
at
all. And they win. They beat Manfred, but Manfred goes, haha, Saturday morning cartoon villain, grabs the Everchild and flies away. Now, here's something I want to point out that's really interesting, is that like Andy said, and once again, this is just to point out how inconsistent the writing is before we finally get back into the actual end times. So that whole thing in Nagashazar, that's it. Like Manfred literally fights them, he loses, and he runs away. Now, what's interesting is that Nagash should have been involved, because Nagash is there. He's in Nagashazar. His body is sitting on his throne he's sitting there. He's not doing anything, but he's sitting there. He's literally already back. He's been there for hundreds of years at this point. Now, what's interesting is you might just say, okay, well, maybe the end times just retconned that and they just didn't want to deal with that. And part one of the end times would agree with you. It would say, oh yeah, no, they retconned that because they do something else to bring the guy back.
Laughing.
Yeah. Now, but the writer who wrote the Kane series, which the novel was written by Gav Thorpe, who's awesome. Now, Gav knows Nagash is supposed to be there. So in the Kane book, Tyrion or Malekith and Teclis go to Nagashazar in like an astral projection type way. Like they send their spirits to Nagashazar, where they find Nagash sitting on his throne. This is before his like resurrection, but he's there in person, and they are talking in front of him, and he stirs. Like his awareness picks up that Nagash and Teclis are there, and he starts looking at them, and he starts moving, and he starts looking at them, and they go, oh fuck, we need to get the fuck out of here. Like he's still like, he's waking up, we gotta go. And it's like, wait, so is he there or is he not?
It's actually hilarious. And for those of us who pay attention to the background, and we can't help but enjoy everything that it offers, particularly given that this was pitched as a celebration of all that was Warhammer. So basically, if you were a big fan of Warhammer, this was you getting everything that you wanted. It was a piece of fan service to say, thanks for buying it for the last 30 years. Away you go. We're sorry it's ending, but how awesome is this? Seeing inconsistencies hard written into the material, that was not a good start. But also seeing characters act in really random ways and incredible important events being skimmed over with a sentence. It was sad. Because you felt that things weren't going to end well.
The warning signs were there.
Yeah, totally. And as we mentioned near the beginning of the stream, it gets a lot worse as it moves on.
Yeah. So I'm just looking at time already. So
me too.
I'm gonna just run us through a lot of major events, and me and Andy are just gonna give our hot thoughts on it. Bretonnian Civil War. So I think it started off great. Of that, Malabad's back. He's got like some nefarious. He's got like all these like outcast knights with him. He's even got some undead with him. Cool, makes sense. Like it starts off strong.
Yep.
Where I hate it is when Archon the Black gets involved. I really, really hate the way that story changes. In that it's not about Malabad anymore. Instead, Malabad gets turned into a vampire for some reason. Which I love that Archon the Black turns him into a vampire too, because
that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, it does if you are a huge fan of that Nagash trilogy we talked about. Because remember,
I'm a massive fan of that.
Yeah. Because remember, Archon the Black's the one who makes the vampire elixir, not Neferata, according to that book. Which that book also heavily influenced a lot of the undead, unfortunately. There were some like you could see a lot that Josh Reynolds in particular was a very big fan of the Nagash trilogy, which is super unfortunate. Because that influenced how he handled a lot of the undead plots, and he handled most of them, and that's why I really don't like them. But yeah, so Archon turns Malabad into a vampire, and some out of literally fucking nowhere, a prophecy is given that says that Malabad cannot be killed by a mortal blade. Like,
of course.
Which, like, who the fuck made that prophecy? First of all, second of all, that it's such a bullshit thing to do to Malabad's character. Of that, Malabad was a fun character. Yeah. Because he is, if you read between the lines and you go read his stuff in Barony of the Damned, he is a genuinely fascinating character who believes there's something deeply, deeply wrong with the Lady of the Lake, and he's trying to save his country from this perceived evil.
There's a really good story there, and they ignored the story so they could say, and then this happened.
Oh, sorry, did I say it backwards? Archon turns Malabad into a vampire. I'm sorry if I said that backwards. But anyway,
you said that right. I heard it right.
I did, but I saw some. Oh, well, it was from Hammond, so it was probably a joke. Let's see. Holy Artist, another cheer. Wouldn't it be easier to make Malabad and the Red Duke team up? You could, but that's they're not the same character. They're very different. The Red Duke is fucking insane.
Yeah.
It's not his fault. Like, genuinely, it's not. The Red Duke is super fucking tragic. One of my favorite characters because of how tragic his story is. But no, he's completely out of his mind. Like, the Red Duke doesn't even know what time it is, like, year-wise. He honestly thinks he's, like, hundreds of years in the past most of the time. Mm-hmm. So, like, would they have teamed up? Probably not. The Red Duke would not make for a good ally. Because he's just too... Like, I could see Malabad trying to manipulate him, absolutely. But I don't think Malabad would ever trust him to be like a genuine ally, because that'd be stupid to trust him. But anyway, so Malabad lays waste to most of Bretonnia because he has Archon the Black with him, which sucks because it takes away a lot of Malabad's story.
I think his agency. It's just such a shame because he had such a good story, and it's basically undermined, and he's just turned into an undead shell.
Yep, and he fights his dad, Lewin Langer. Yep. We don't get to see it; it happens off screen.
Like most of the big fights.
Yep, he fights Lewin, breaks his body, and doesn't kill him for some reason. He just like heavily mortally wounds him vaguely, and Lewin gets taken away and gets Gilles Le Breton, in that he gets put on a boat and sent to the Lady of the Lake for a healing coma. Though his is a lot faster.
Oh, it's getting worse.
Yeah, and then now I will say there are some cool moments, like Kimmler and Krell resurrect the full Legion that Krell, like, they find Krell's original Legion, they wake them all up, so it's like this really powerful army of Graveguard. That's super fun.
Cool.
And cool. We get the final battle between Heinrich Kimmler and Duke Therod.
You remembered more than me in the name.
I can't remember what his name is, but like he's quite old at this point.
Yeah.
And they have this big epic final battle, and like the Duke gets like this fucking close to killing Kimmler, and it's awesome.
Tancred is the suggestion.
Yes, it was Tancred. Yes, it was Tancred.
I should. Yeah,
and Tancred gets really fucking.
One of my games. What an idiot.
Yeah, and Kimmler, in my opinion, is one of the best characters in the end times. He gets a very fun, well-written story, in my opinion, of that. Like, he gets to fight all of his ancient enemies. He gets to have his duel with Tancred and nearly dies, but then he kills him. You get the whole thing about, like, you could tell Nagash is kind of coming back because Krell is starting to act a little weird, and he's kind of...
That's good, because that really gives them the character of Nagash and what he does to everybody that's using necromancy. He's effectively necromancy's god, and that's great.
Yeah. And it finally builds up to the final battle of Massental Abbey, where Yeah, where you find out the whole reason that Archon the Black is even here and is helping out is because the Staff of Nagash is in the Abbey, and he wants it back because it's key to resurrecting Nagash. So he goes in there, and Kimmler gets to it first, which I actually really like this part of the story. If Kimmler gets to it first and reveals that he's betrayed Nagash and everybody, because Kimmler doesn't want to serve anyone. He's really paranoid about it.
Kimmler.
Yeah, and he's an arrogant little shit, and he's like, the Dark Gods have promised me power of no servitude, so screw you guys. And he has a big old fight with Archon where Kimmler is winning. A lot of people think he loses. No, he actually is full on winning because Archon can't beat him. But Kimmler reaches too far, and the Dark Gods are just feeding him energy because they want him to win, and he blows up. He miscasts and he dies, which is honestly a very appropriate way for Kimmler to die.
Yeah, it's quite fun. If you're going to have a character die because of his own arrogance, it's him, and that's loosely what happens. It's a shame that the chaos element was added so strongly. I don't think that was necessarily needed, but it's still a pretty damn good end.
Yeah, so he blows up, and Archon is a lich, so being blown up, it doesn't really bother him that much. He's just like, oh, all right. And he takes the staff and he runs away. And that's basically, and then pretty much like when Archon leaves, Bretonnia gets involved in one big final epic battle. Once again, this happens pretty much off screen. The Green Knight returns, reveals he is Gilles Le Breton, and he kills Malabad because he's not mortal. He's immortal.
And I'm not against that. Pretty good idea. I am against what follows, though.
Yeah. So Gilles, now I want to, this is one of the dumbest parts. This is also the end of the Bretonnia saga, functionally. There is one last scene that I actually do think is cool, but Gilles returns, he kills Malabad, fine. And then he reclaims the throne because he says, I'm your king and I've returned at this hour of most need. And then he does absolutely nothing.
Yeah, this whole section just annoys me beyond compare, actually. We have ourselves a character who has been rumored to be the first king of Bretonnia for pretty much since his existence when I imagine it was the 5th edition army list came out for the first Bretonnian one. I think it was 5th. The Green Knight, an extraordinary piece of art by Mark Gibbons, an extraordinary model, a character that's been sitting all the way through. He is a character that's pretty much mythic, and then they just ground him in normality again and say, no, actually, he's just a king, and he's talking to everyone, and it's all kind of cool again, and he's just come back, completely taking away from that mystic nature of the character, undermining everything that's been written about this character who comes back in times of need and goes away again. He should not be taking place as king. That's not what he's there to do as a character type. He's there to do other things. He's there to look around at the others and leave them to decide who amongst them, which one of the Grail Knights there who is in position can become the next king. It's not his job to be the king. Why did he even reveal himself? The reveal perhaps should have been to someone else saying something else on the
like
it's
Duke Jared, who ends up like Jared, who ends up being the POV Bretonnia character for the rest of the end times. All he had to do was go, hey, you're king now. I gotta go fight shit. I'll see you later. But no,
that would have been perfect. And it means that they don't need to demystify one of their coolest characters, but they demystified him. And then he does fuck all. And that, if anything, makes it worse.
I want to make it super clear, guys. This happens in the first year of the end times. Gilles does nothing for the next 9 years. He sits on a throne and does literally fuck all for 9 years. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's. I remember the first time that I read it, I was like, yeah, this is what I would have done. But I can understand that they're setting something up. And you're just sort of left there hanging on tenterhooks going, when are they going to pull something out of their hat and show why they did this? And they never do.
Yeah, and the end times is full of that. It is full of cliffhangers and Chekhov's guns that never fire. Which for the apocalypse is fucking dumb. If you're going to set up a Chekhov's gun, pull the trigger in the end times.
Holy Artist, thanks very much for the cheer. And I completely agree. He's set up to be someone who's not the central character. He's set up to be someone that does things off at the side and everyone goes, oh, how awesome is he? While other people are the point of view characters and they're the ones that are driving the story forward with aid from this mystical other entity that lies to the side. And yeah, agreed completely. You rock.
Yeah, and that's the Bretonnian Civil War, which you could see there are threads there that are often pulling upon things that have been set up in the past of Warhammer Fantasy, but the end times completely mangles them. Like it starts to pull on those threads and you're like, oh, okay, I like where this is going. And then it drops the ball. And that's the end times in a nutshell.
And, and sadly, as well, to a degree, this is the best of the end times because it is the one where they're trying to take everything together and they're trying to tell the stories that have been told over the course of the last so many army books or possibly novels or other books. They're trying to pull them all together and then just drop them into place. They nail very little of them, but at least they give it a damn good stab. This, however, changes as they then move on to their own plots later and disregard almost everything that came to pass beforehand.
Yeah. So Nagash is the next big thing to really focus on. The resurrection of Nagash has some good parts, has some bad parts.
Yeah.
So the resurrection of Nagash is there are some parts of the book that are kind of fumbled in some weird ways of that. While Nagash is an interesting book overall, in my opinion, it wastes way too much time trying to set up for Nagash's resurrection, and focusing on them collecting all the MacGuffins to bring Nagash back. Did we need an entire chapter dedicated to Manfred fighting the Skaven to get the Fellblade back? No. That could have been summarized very quickly.
For goodness sake, given how they summarize some other parts.
Yeah.
I mean, when they're doing the setup at the beginning, explaining the step-by-step things that happened, which includes some summaries that are almost criminal, given how much they cover in just a paragraph, that this is, in comparison to some of the events that had previously been summarized, less of an event. Yet it gets a lot of space.
Yeah, and that's not even touching on the novel, which that's literally all the novel focuses on, is the process to resurrecting Nagash, and it's because once again, not saying anything about him as a person, just saying about writing decisions. Josh Reynolds was far more focused on writing about his fanfic insert characters than he was about anything else. Like Erican, the Crow Fiend, I don't know why the fuck he's the main character of that book. He does not matter to the setting at all. But he's the main character of the entire book, and it honestly ruins it.
Particularly because this is a book that is a central pillar of the end times, which means it's a central pillar of how Games Workshop wants to represent the end of Warhammer. And they decided to end Warhammer on characters you don't know. And why?
Yeah, well, it really reads like the authors were given a very, very broad prompt and told do whatever you want. And that's what some of them did. And some of them did it well, some of them not so much. So anyway, so the resurrection of Nagash, they go around gathering his MacGuffins. It's entirely too focused on. And we get there are some fun parts, like the part where Archon and Manfred finally talk to one another and they have a big magic duel because they're trying to kill each other at first, is genuinely a lot of fun. I enjoyed that part. But everything else that comes out, everything that comes after that is kind of, and you kind of have this interweaving plot of you could tell Archon's legit trying to resurrect Nagash, whereas Manfred is not. Manfred wants Nagash to come back for just a second so he could steal all of his power and then kill him, whereas Archon wants to legitimately resurrect Nagash.
And I think there's a good tension there. That's quite nice.
And that does build some really fun narrative tension because you're wondering which of the undead is on whose side. And you have characters your vampires trying to assassinate Archon on Manfred's will, and then there are other agents of Archon's trying to do stuff to Manfred, and it's fun. But this builds up.
I think it also, just to add an extra little detail, it really does speak to how Nagash had previously been characterized as using vampires to get his own end. And the idea that Manfred, in his arrogance, thinks he's quite separate from that and thinks that he's not being influenced by Nagash, where he almost certainly is, because he's trying to bring Nagash back, which is stupid if you're a vampire. Seriously stupid, yet he's still doing it. And it makes sense for the characters involved. And there's and the fact that there's still conflict going on, I think, is pretty cool. I think it would have been better, though, in some regard, if Archon was playing him, but it doesn't look like that, which is a bit of a shame.
Yeah, and Archon does at the end pull one over on him. Archon does get Manfred by the end of it, but we get the Battle of the Nine Demons, which is fun. And it does tell an interesting story of basically everybody tries to stop Nagash's resurrection. Everybody sends a little army to stop him. The dwarves are something weird's happened in Sylvania, and Ungrim Ironfist runs down to go fight. And the dark gods go, something's going on in Sylvania, and they send Malagor the Dark Omen, cool pick, to go mess things up with a big old army of beastmen. All right, cool. The Wood Elves go, something's going on in Sylvania, and Erloth leads an army over to Sylvania, which we'll get into why that's really stupid. Not that he went. We'll get into what happens to him. I hate.
Oh man.
We are this far away from me going on my mega rant for the end time, so everybody prepare your butts.
It's coming.
Yeah, it's got like brace for impact because it's about to happen.
Oh yeah.
And the Empire goes, oh, there's something going on there. We should probably look into it. And the High Elves are like, oh, we know where the Everchild is. She's in Sylvania. And Tyrion goes, I'm going to go. And Teclis says, no, you can't. You can't go. You have to be here because the Malekith's attacking us. And he goes, fine. I'll send Eltharion the Grim and my squire, and like literally everybody that we could send. And they go, okay, fine. So Eltharion the Grim leads his little army over. So what happens is that the dwarves, due to the machinations of the undead, end up colliding with Malagor's army. That's fine. I like that. That was a cool plot point. Malagor is hilarious in that battle because he's pissed about it. He doesn't want to fight the dwarves, but he can't get the beastmen to disengage because they're beastmen. And it's actually really funny. And Malagor's finally like, fuck this. I got to go do other stuff. And he just leaves, which, yeah, all right.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
The High Elves, yes, Eldria, thank you, is the squire's name. Who's a great character that she got shafted. But the High Elves make it to the Battle of the Nine Demons. We'll come back to them in a second. The Empire doesn't make it, but I forget what happens to them. I think they run into like a vampire army and they get stalled. And then the Wood Elves. Oh, fuck me. Okay, so the Wood Elves have a very interesting narrative in the end times that I think the entire thing sucks. And it's because it revolves around one character. And it is in my opinion, Andy may not agree with this, it is the worst fucking character in the entirety of the end times. And it's Lilith.
They fucked it. Pardon me, sorry.
Yeah, Lilith, Erloth, and Incubuses.
Incubi.
Why do you torture me like this?
Incubuses, funny.
Oh yeah. All right. So here's the thing about Lilith. Andy, I'll allow Andy to.
You go on this one.
I'm going to go off on my rant, and I would like Andy to correct the mistakes I'm going to make.
No,
because I want everyone to understand how much I hate what they did to Lilith. Lilith is a character who, prior to the end times, is a very mysterious elven goddess of prophecy in the moon. And one of the things that's very interesting about her is that she's a little bit of a schemer because she cheats in a really fun way. And that Assurin tells all the gods, you're not allowed to go down and interact with the mortals. You're not allowed to like bridge that gap anymore. We must be separate. And Lilith goes, okay, Dad, I will or whatever their relationship is. I assume
actually granddaughter.
So she goes, okay, Granddad, I will not physically go talk to the mortals, and she influences them through their dreams. So technically she's not breaking the rules, which I really like about her character. And she does a lot of really cool things. She has some really interesting little influences with Teclis through the staff. She doesn't directly interact with Teclis, I don't think, in a lot of his stories, but there's a lot of like, her being there in his dreams. Erloth, she has like some really cool interactions with Erloth, where once again, they don't talk. Like, it's a lot of like weird dreamy stuff and prophecies and like leading Erloth in these really weird like spiritual journeys where he discovers the moon bow. Like she gives artifacts to people. There's three really powerful godly artifacts that Lilith gives to the elves. The staff of Lilith, the moon bow, and then a crown that gets lost at sea. So she's a really cool character. The end times does two things. First, 8th edition sets up that Lilith full-on meets somebody, which is that she meets Erloth. Now, this I'm vaguely okay with. It's fine, whatever. Where, like, through prophecy and dream and some weird shit, Erloth gets put through a test of courage because he's a cowardly little shithead, and he eventually succeeds his test of courage, saving Lilith from what he believes is a greater demon of Slaanesh. It's vaguely implied that the greater demon might not have actually been real. It might have been real, but if it was real, it was more like dreaming wood type shit. And she's like, hey, good job, you. Here's my blessing, and he becomes like this really big badass. Fine. Totally cool with that. The end times, Lilith is a person in the end times. She's not a goddess. She is a person where she is showing up physically, she's interacting with people, and she is full on. The only way the end times makes any fucking sense with Lilith is if you go under the presumption that because she is the goddess of prophecy, the end times are coming, she looks into the future and she goes completely fucking insane because of what she sees. That is the only way her character makes sense. Because the end times goes on to say that Lilith is many, many different entities simultaneously. She is Lilith, she is Ladriel, she is the Lady of the Lake, and she also is the most major opponent of the dark gods out of everybody. Where Lilith is the one who is very heavily implied to puppet the entire Everchild situation. And then she full on is the one who and to be clear, she tricks Teclis. She does not trust him or talk to him. She lies to Teclis and tells him to let the Everchild die, to allow her to be sacrificed because she wants Nagash to come back, but she wants him to come back a little weakened, which is a lot to swallow. But she is so dedicated to allowing Nagash to come back later weakened that she even goes so far as to, when the Wood Elves are trying to get to Nagash, she opens a portal and walks out and says, nope, y'all are coming with me. I can't let y'all stop Nagash coming back. And they go, oh, okay. And they just follow her into the portal and leave. So the Wood Elves don't help at all. She's also the one that assassinates Ariel. Yeah. Lilith murders Aisha. Full on. Because the thing about Ariel, and the end times does its best to try and make this not the case, which is a lie. Ariel is literally just Aisha. Yeah. She's the mortal embodiment of Aisha. She's not a prophet of Aisha, which I wish the setting had done a better job separating what the fuck the Everqueen is versus what Ariel is.
I really wish they had done, but they didn't.
But the most generous scenario you could say is that the Everqueen is more like a hardcore priestess of Aisha, but Ariel is Aisha, and Lilith murders her full on. It's not even subtle. She just fucking kills her. And then she calls on the Everqueen and is like, hey, you should go help the Wood Elves because their queen is dying. And by that she means, by the way, can you go down into the Oak of Ages and finish her off for me? Because that's what Alariel does. She goes down to the bottom of the Oak of Ages under the presumption that she's trying to heal Ariel, and instead the end times reveals that the two of them get into a fight and they become one entity that fights itself for control. They fuse the two Aisha pieces of the puzzle back together. The two of them fight each other, and Ariel's subconscious is killed by Alariel's, and Alariel takes over as the new embodiment of Aisha. Which, fun fact, Age of Sigmar completely flips on its head, because Age of Sigmar goes, just kidding, Ariel won, even though she goes by Alariel, which is more realistically what probably would have happened. But in any event, so that's a couple things Lilith has done. This is also the same Lilith. Lilith is a goddess of prophecy. She's supposed to know what's going to happen, which guides her bullshit decisions. She's the one that tells Teclis to go to Middenheim, go down into the depths of Middenheim, and steal Ulrich's power, which he does. He steals the Flame of Ulrich, which causes Middenheim to just fucking die, which, if you've been paying attention to the end times, also results in the entire fucking world blowing up. It's literally, the end times is literally just Lilith's fault. If you pay attention to the overall scope of the storyline, Lilith is the reason everybody loses. She is full to blame. Hammond, you're not wrong. She also reveals that, her and Erloth totally banged and they had a kid, which Erloth has no memory of this. Erloth never recalls being with Lilith. So it's did she just rape him, or what the fuck happened? Or weird god shit. But she's I had a daughter and I created a new dimension because Lilith. Oh my God.
It gets worse.
Lilith gives a speech when she goes to Ulthuan. She gives a speech that her and the elven gods are not gods. They are aliens from another dimension that was destroyed by chaos in an end times. And when that universe was destroyed, her and what we know as the elven gods escaped that dimension to this dimension and made themselves into gods because they're precursors. So and they're not the old ones, to be clear. So that means that the old ones were apparently not real. and the elves were actually the old ones, which doesn't make any fucking sense. And they created this universe, which then the dark gods came to, and apparently that's a cycle that's been going on for eternity, is that the dark gods show up in a universe that the elven gods make. The elven gods create a universe, it eventually falls to chaos, they run to a next universe.
You have no idea.
Yeah, it happens over and over and over. So Lilith tries to break this cycle by, wait for it, creating a new universe made by the elven gods, but this time it'll be super secret, so the chaos gods totally won't find it. And it's called the Haven. And there's this whole buildup of all the Bretonnians that have ever died, all the Grail Knights, everyone that has ever like been part of the Lady of the Lake. When they died, their souls were taken by Lilith to be guardians for this new dimension, which they did not know was part of the bargain. So like she's made them into eternal guardians that will never rest or anything to defend a universe that is inhabited purely by elves. Which okay. And the hilarious thing is you have all this build, and that's why Lilith does everything. Lilith gets countless billions, literally billions of people die because Lilith is setting up for this scheme. And then because she feels bad talking to Duke Jared, she reveals all of this information to him. And Be'lakor is right fucking next to them in the shadows and goes, oh, that's cool. And when Be'lakor is captured so that the dark gods don't find out about it, because they're like, oh, we can't kill him, because if we kill him, he'll just go back to the realm of chaos, and then the dark gods will know about the Haven. We can't do that, so we got to capture him. So, okay, this has taken 5 fucking books setting this up, right? The Haven being this whole thing. And then Lilith, the second they imprison Be'lakor, once again, very explicitly, so he does not tell the dark gods about the Haven so that it will be safe. And the Haven is guarded by all of the Bretonnian dead that have ever existed so that they can protect it. And it's a whole dimension where all of the elven dead have been sent. Let me reiterate that. Lilith finds the mortal incarnation of Erithkial and convinces her to use all of those souls to create a new universe. All right? All right? After they capture Be'lakor, the dark gods have no reason to know this exists. She looks to the Haven and it dies. It dies instantly. She has no idea where it went. It ceases to exist. And you may think, oh, well, surely that's a setup for the Age of Sigmar. Nope, it just fucking died. It's gone. It died. The end. Like, I fucking hate Lilith in the end times. I hate her. Sorry, go ahead. I gotta stop.
No, you don't need to stop, because I think in many respects, Lilith speaks to the entirety of this project. And that's that they're setting up a very different style of Warhammer universe, the Age of Sigmar style, with all our little fragmented realms and the gods doing crazy shit, and the gods doing all sorts of stuff where the mortals are just their pawns. And there is eternal war, and there's Sigmar Marines. And it's not even in Age of Sigmar. Whole giant story was pointless.
Oh, yeah.
And so much build up that went nowhere. And for me, someone who absolutely adores the lore and what's been built up over the course of time, it stomps all over everything that came before and said, you know, those things that you think might be true, they're not. And you know why? Well, there's no good reason for it. They just aren't. Lilith basically being Ladriel, a completely different goddess, and going, actually, I'm her, is just the biggest bullshit. Ladriel is quite literally Azurin's wife, the only god that was allowed to walk the mortal realm. And there was a whole story behind it that was very discreetly building towards something that they decided, no, actually, also, that's just a fake. The real one is actually, wait a minute, Azrael's real wife is, and none of it makes sense. And the more you look at it, the less Lilith makes sense as a character. And then they make her do the craziest bullshit that you're just left at the end of it going, Why? This isn't just insanity. This isn't just a god going mad. This just seems like someone's writing stuff down and making things happen in an order.
Some of these comments are killing me.
Because it's just happening. It's such a bit of craziness. And at the end of it, when I was reading it, I put the book down, and for the first time in all of my long Warhammer history, I went, you know what? I am actually done. They've managed to do something that I don't think they wanted to do. They were supposed to be celebrating Games Workshop's great history of Warhammer, but instead they've created bullshit that makes no sense, that sounds like that's going to be their writing style in the future. Oh my God, this is bad. Actually bad. I'm going to put this down, and I think I might be cured of Warhammer. What the fuck? Where did I get?
Yeah, it's... So anyway, that's my whole thing about Lilith. Also, her death is hilarious because it's so stupid. Where
oh god, I forgot about that.
Yeah, she literally asked Teclis to murder her with his own hands so that he can use her blood to teleport him and everyone else to Middenheim to stop Archaon. And the ritual just fucking barely works. Like, it's not even a good ritual. Like, she was a terrible god. She's fucking awful.
Utterly awful.
Yeah, no, it's terrible. There's like a whole lot of stuff. I will flat out say Lilith is not the Lady of the Lake. I don't care what the fuck anybody says. I could see an argument that the Lady of the Lake was originally, or maybe has a relationship with Ladriel. Yes. But Lilith, absolutely fucking not. Makes zero sense.
It completely breaks up the whole concept of the elven pantheon and where Lilith sits in that pantheon. It completely makes sense for someone like Ladriel and what Ladriel represents in the pantheon. It fits her character. She's a character of shadows and lies. She's a character who moves to other places and does things with the lost. And Gilles Le Breton would have been lost. His tribe had been cast out. They were in a difficult place. The whole thing makes sense for her, and if you look at where she sits inside the elven mandala and where the gods all sit, it all sort of slots into place and is completely unlike literally everything to do with Lilith. And just the conflation of it was already an issue for me, but when you then see what she does, none of it makes sense. Is this person meant to be an idiot?
Okay,
some power.
I want to say, I'm seeing some people in chat being like, "Oh, the Haven wasn't destroyed; it's an Age of AOS." Quote me a page. I've read all of First Edition Age of Sigmar, all of Second Edition Age of Sigmar, and most of Third Edition Age of Sigmar, and the Haven's fucking dead. It does not show up ever. It should have shown up by now. And it's just not there. It's not
just to talk about something slightly unrelated. Thanks very much, Hammond. Ladriel as a name actually comes from Liadriel, which was the original Wood Elf god that was in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay First Edition. And Liadriel was indeed strongly influenced by Galadriel. Indeed, not just strongly influenced, it's just a section of it. So Liadriel, who was a goddess of lyres and wine and dance, became Ladriel, a very different deity much later. But yeah, you're not actually too far off it with your crazy joke, which is surprisingly on point.
Yeah. But yeah, anyway, so
thanks for that.
Oh, someone actually gave me a page, so I'm gonna look at that while I get your thoughts on a thing of like but yeah, anyway, yeah. So Lilith aside, like I for a Lizardman fan, the whole thing about Lilith saying that like, oh yeah, no, we're actually entities from a prior dimension, like that fucked up the lore so much with such a simple little thing that I don't even have words for it. But anyway, which is why I'm just like, no, she had to be completely fucking insane. It's the only way it makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense if she's mad.
But anyway, so Nagash is resurrected, and the ritual to resurrect him is fucking complicated. Of that, so they bring
the resurrected Nagash is re-resurrected.
Yeah, so they bring back all the artifacts that he had in life. Fine, fair, cool.
Yep. Cool.
They destroy they bring the Fell Blade and destroy it because it killed him. Okay, cool, fine.
And you can argue had absorbed some of his essence, so it makes sense. You've got a good reason for doing that.
Yeah, they've even got his hand and everything. Like that's cool. I'm cool with all that. What's weird is that, and granted, they try to explain this as Nagash didn't just want to come back. He wanted to come back as like a full-on god. instead of just little Nagash. So the ritual has them murder a bunch of direct descendants of the gods. Now, what's weird is that it's the entire old world pantheon and then one elf.
It's a weird setup.
Yeah, so the Fey Enchantress, who's turned into a vampire, which should disqualify her, but whatever, I guess she still counts.
Yeah.
And then it's like a direct
Who's also probably an elf.
A direct descendant, so like big bad priest of, I think, Ulrich, Tall, Ranald, Shalia, Sigmar. It's a goofy cast.
It's bullshit.
It's not every god either. It's only like the ones they've remembered, I guess, when they wrote it.
Because I mean, normally when you look at the Empire and its primary deities, there's actually 10, not 8.
Yeah, so they kill all of them except for one. It's just fucking Volkmar. I don't understand why they hated Volkmar so much.
They really hate Volkmar.
Volkmar, they put him in Nagash's armor. They cut off his arm and put Nagash's stump on it. And then they put, the staff and the sword in his hands. They destroy the fell blade. And then they put the crown of sorcery on his head with all 9 books of Nagash around him. They sacrifice all these nerds, including Aliathra, the Everchild, who's supposed to, I guess, dump the Elven pantheon, but they're like, oh yeah, she's a Shurin, that's fine. Yeah, so, and then they unleash a big spell and Nagash is resurrected. Now, what's a cool scene is that Archon actually, like, when this whole ritual is happening, Manfred's fighting the elves, making sure they don't interrupt the ritual, and when Manfred realizes the ritual has started, he tries to go co-opt the ritual to feed the power into himself, so he can become very powerful. But when he tries to do that, he gets there and realizes there's a magic barrier in the way because Archon the Black knew he was going to do that. And Archon goes, haha, nope. And that is genuinely a fun moment in that he specifically designed the barrier so Manfred can't get through it. Because he knew what Manfred was going to try and do. Because it's fucking Manfred. Come on. Like, dude betrayed his own dad. Of course he's going to do that.
Yep.
And Altharion the Grim is just a badass in this entire final battle. Like, he whoops Manfred's ass. He makes this big final fight. He gets to the barrier and he forces himself through the barrier. Like, he just, through sheer willpower and being Altharion the fucking Grim, forces his way through, and it kind of destroys his body. And when he gets through, Archon the Black's like, wow, that's really impressive. And then just goes and kills him. he literally casts Hand of Dust and just instantly kills Altharion, turning him into dust. Which I thought was it's a poignant moment.
It is. See, one of the things that you really wanted the End Times to do was to celebrate all that was great and good about Warhammer, as we've said multiple times. And Eltharion, the Grim Warder of Tor Yvresse, had been added in on the 4th edition of the game, so had a long history of around about, by the point that this book comes out, we're looking like 32 years off the top of my head. And that's the sort of character that should definitely be showing up, and the sort of character, if we're ending the world, who should certainly be dying, and giving him this badass end is a good thing to do. So broadly, I'm not against this shit at all. But do I wish that he had been killed by something perhaps a little bit more appropriate? What is the connection between Archon the Black and Eltharion? Fuck all is the answer. So it's not necessarily the best end for Eltharion, but at least it's an end, and it's one that doesn't seem nonsensical. There is definitely reasons for him to be fighting. There's definitely reasons for him to fall here. So it's all right. I'll bring up Mr. Pig there. Thanks very much, Mr. Pig. My only guess is that they use Volkmar's body to make it so Nagash loses his vulnerability to Sigmar. Not great, but it could be something. And you know what, Mr. Pig? Oh, do I say something there?
They could have just taken his blood. They didn't have to turn him into Nagash. That was just rude.
It was just rude. I think there is a certain amusement value to using the Grand Theogenist to do it. Although, to me, if you're looking at how religion typically works in the Warhammer world, those who are effectively living saints, for want of a better description, the Grand Theogenist is almost a manifestation of Sigmar on Earth. His flesh should be largely incorruptible. His flesh here is not incorruptible. So in some respects, they are going against what has already been established as primary Warhammer lore, so to speak. I think it's a shame using parts of him or doing something with him, I think is worthwhile. Ultimately, though, you want it to be necromancy, because that's the whole point of Nagash. And this isn't necromancy. This is just simply repurposing.
What I would have thought would have been cooler is if Archon the Black and Manfred had gone on a quest to find Sigmar's mortal corpse to do it. That would have been fucking awesome. Using Volkmar,
and it would also have been a celebration of Warhammer as a whole, because ultimately, if it's going to be a celebration of Warhammer, you need to be saying Warhammer, the fucking Warhammer, Heldenhammer, his fucking self.
Artolf, is this the right one? Because if this is the right one, the Haven is not what you think it is.
Because he's secret Ron Jeremy. Let's say the less we say about that, the better.
Oh, Jesus Christ, Hammond.
That's pretty much seriously. But yeah, cut a long story short on this one. It's definitely a story choice. They could have made arguably better choices, but this isn't the worst that the End Times has to offer by an enormous stretch. This is fine. This is the resurrection, re-resurrection, depending upon how you look at it, of Nagash. He's back. Who doesn't want to have Nagash around? And some of the artwork for Nagash coming back is proper kick-ass. It's not the worst part of the End Times. I didn't hate this. I didn't like how some of it was executed. I thought the pulling together of the various individuals was, in fact, just super, super weird. Not just a little bit odd, but the 8 individuals plus our elf makes no great sense, doesn't speak to the story of Nagash, doesn't even speak to the 8 winds of magic, doesn't speak to really anything, to the point that I was just left going, why did they do it like this? What was the plan?
Yeah. Okay, so looking at the time. Oh, thank you.
If you were asked to redo End Times but had to keep the basic ideas, yes, I would. And I think I could do it really well as well.
That's how I feel about it as well. Like, I would not throw away. There are people that are like, oh, throw away everything and start over. No, there are some really good things I would use.
Yep. Ditto. I think there's a hell of a lot of good in there. I just think that the storytelling was often just thrown out the window for the story they were trying to reach.
Yeah, and one thing I also want to say is that a lot of people, and I understand why people feel this way, get really upset and think like, oh, it's super dumb that like Chaos 1 and Warhammer World blew up. It's like that's kind of been foretold for a really long time. Like, that's how Warhammer ends. Chaos blows up the world. Like, that is literally how it ends. Like, if you're sticking true, I think, to what it feels like the intent always was, that's how it has to end.
I could not agree more. If you're going to be telling the story of the End Times, the story is Chaos winning. It has always been a 5 minutes to midnight setting, so to speak. There is these cycles of Chaos invasions. The Everchosen, our 13th Everchosen Archeon, has 12 previous attempts where they attempted to wipe out the world. And that is something that is pretty much a part of Warhammer almost from the beginning, whether it was the Everchosen story, which came later, around about, was that 6th, 6th? Where was Archeon first added? It was in the Champions of Chaos book. Champions of Chaos book in the box with the additional box set. So that's 5th, with the box set, totally. So there you go. That's 5th edition onwards. We had the Everchosen. But before that, we still had Chaos trying to wipe out the world. We had the Realms of Chaos books where they were trying to wipe out the world. It's not a new storyline. It is the story of Warhammer. It's the story that should be told. I'm also going to drop in Rogan. Thank you very much.
I hardly know. I don't know why I love that joke structure so much. I hardly know her. It's stupid, but I always love that joke. So, to speed run through a couple things, Nagash goes to Nehekar.
Yeah, look at the time. We've only really got half an hour to do the next 4 books. What the hell happened?
No, the good news is the rest of them are very short and all happen at the same time, generally speaking.
It's fair.
So Nagash goes to Nehekara. He fights the Tomb Kings and he wins. Just gonna summarize that
that's
all
pretty much it, really, isn't it? But his winning brings about a really big change for him.
Yeah, it is a very fun story. Nagash attacks Nehekara from a bunch of different directions. He picks 9 Mortarks, which is really fun, where he has like 9 champions, and we get like he brings back Vladimir Karstein, kind of hilariously, much to Manfred's upsetty spaghetti. He he calls upon the Nameless, aka Drakenfels, who they couldn't call Drakenfels for legal reasons, so they called him the Nameless, and they imply he's Drakenfels the entire time. He calls upon Luther Harkin, who magically escapes from the Lizardmen, despite the fact in the 8th edition, Luther Harkin gets captured by the Lizardmen. No idea how he got out, and they don't bother to explain. But and he gets like Dieter Hellschnitt as one of his Mortarks, and it's a whole bunch of guys, which is fun. And the invasion is really fun. It's very well written. Archaon, he's really just escaping under all that armor. But
or Abaddon.
Oh yeah. Abaddon's like, I need to win. Just let me win one.
Just once.
But there is a lot of fun stories there. Like the Tomb Kings are not loyal to Cetra. A lot of them betray Cetra because they want to grasp at power. That's very fitting for the Tomb Kings. They've always been considered a neutral faction because they're very self-obsessed. So like the whole Nehekaran storyline is pretty cool. The only thing I don't like is when Nagash eats Usirian.
The whole eating of a god thing. I don't dislike the concept. I just didn't like the execution. I don't think it was necessary at all, particularly because it starts confirming that the gods are something that is of deep and extraordinary importance. I also didn't really like what happens with the whole Wind of Shyish.
Yeah. So, oh god. Oh,
yeah.
Okay. So,
oh,
this is actually kind of an interesting topic. In the end times, one of its major features is the vortex gets unbound.
Yep.
Now, Nagash kickstarts it much earlier than the rest of it happens because Nagash, when he comes out, he's so strong. Jesus Christ, he's so strong. He rips the Wind of Death out of the vortex. Which is a little weird because that's not technically how the vortex works, but
it's not how it works. And in fact, just a small rant. This plot line is bullshit. It's just bullshit. It doesn't make sense to anything at all that had been previously discussed about how the winds of magic work, about how the gates work, about how death works, about how any of it works. It was literally done because you could write words one after another in Word. Yes, you could say it. I will pull the Wind of Shyish, all of it, from the vortex into me. What? I mean, you can write that, but what the fuck does that even mean?
Yeah, so what Nagash the writing for it is very simple and doesn't really make sense, but what he functionally does is he makes himself like the end point for the Wind of Death, which there are a lot of much better ways they could have tried to write that.
Really was.
But like and funny enough, he does this again in Age of Sigmar, but in Age of Sigmar, it's way better written how he does it. But in fantasy, they're like, oh, he just rips the wind out and injects it into himself. But then he realizes he can't because turns out the Everchild, oh my God, she wasn't, which I still find it so funny that Archon the Black and Manfred could not figure out that she was Tyrion's kid, even though it's so obvious. But anyway, she had the curse of Cain in her because she's a descendant of an Aryan. And so Nagash has the curse of Cain in him because he took her
curse
blood.
of Cain. I mean, I love that as a twist.
Yeah,
I think it's beautiful. These little that's actually one of my biggest issues with the whole thing. There's loads of great potential story in here, but it's all predicated on previous broken shit because they didn't do the storytelling properly. As we said earlier in the stream, the actual story behind him having a daughter with the Everqueen and it being the Everchild and everyone thinking that it's broken. It doesn't make sense. None of the elves would believe it. It would require something super special for this to be the case. And it's particularly being Tyrion would have been 6 when she was most likely born. What the fuck is going on there? But nevertheless, the story itself is brilliant. It's just they didn't build all of the necessary bricks into place to have a strong wall. So the second you look at it with any real thought, you realize that it just blows over with a single gust. And like a wolf coming along, you realize that they didn't build their house out of bricks. They built it out of straw.
Yeah, and like I said, there are some good things here. Like the whole thing with Nagash's body is cursed, so he cannot become a true locus of the Wind of Death. Like, oh, okay, I like that. And then he grounds it into Sylvania, and he's like, okay, this is where death magic goes now. Is like, okay, whatever. So, and then he wanders off. He wanders off to Nehekara because he's like, all right, I gotta purify all this filth out of me. And Neferata's like, hey, look, I found Valea, which, like, Jesus Christ. But
oh god, I forgot about that.
Neferata literally by pure fucking chance stumbled on Valea's tomb.
And a Valea appeared.
And she's in a god coma. And Neferata fights Thoric Ironbrow, and what admittedly is a really cool fight. Like Thoric Ironbrow, King Khazad-dûr versus Neferata and Krell. I will say one of my biggest criticisms of the whole Nagash book is he has 9 Mortarks and none of them fucking die. Which, like, that war should have cost Nagash a lot. Yeah. Like, all the stuff he accomplishes, he should have lost at least half of the Mortarks. Like Krell, in my opinion, Krell should have just fucking died in the dwarf fight. There was no need to drag him out.
It was a perfect time to try and kill them. Plus the concept of if you need to have stakes, and if Nagash is rising so strong, and let's be honest, Nagash is not rising so that he can be on the side of the Chaos Gods who are looking to end the world. He is actually, in some respects, according to some individuals, potentially a force for heavy quotation marks good, in that he's going to be holding back potentially chaos with his very existence. He's not a good guy. A force for order. Let's say order here.
Not
Games Workshop does love it. Order versus destruction, because they don't like saying law versus chaos because that's very Michael Moorcock. So he is a force of power against the Chaos Gods, so it should have cost him. The Chaos Gods themselves should have been undermining every last step of Nagash's rise to power. The Changeling should have been working its way through this, or not, perhaps even working against the Chaos Gods, because the Changeling's a dick. They should have been doing some lovely storytelling all the way through this. There was loads of opportunity for it. They had a giant fucking book that spent an entire chapter talking about just one battle. Fuck that. There's a lot that could have gone in here to make it make a little bit more smooth sense.
Yeah, and there are some parts that are good and some parts that are especially dumb here. Like there's a whole thing of like Khalida gets lured to Lamia, which makes perfect sense. Like Neferata goes to Lamia as a distraction, and it works perfectly. Like it attracts a bunch of the Tomb Kings who fucking hate Neferata, including Khalida. They have a big fight. One of them should have died, instead none of them die. And it's really dumb. Like they did not they should have just ended the Khalida Neferata feud right there.
It's the end of the fucking world. This is when you end it.
Yeah, fun fact, for anyone curious, the Khalida Neferata, instead, they quite literally kiss and make up and are like holding each other when the world blows up, because, you know, that makes any fucking sense. God, Josh Reynolds and his anyway, his undead garbage. But which, you know, completely ruins the characters, but that's fine. But
it reminded me a little bit of the end of Game of Thrones.
Yeah,
it all comes crashing down on the Lannisters, who are together again for reasons that nobody.
It's literally
understands. It's basically that. It's just a bullshit storyline to create a moment that, by itself, if you just saw that moment, you go, "How cool does that look?" But then you look at the characters and you go, "They'd never fucking do that ever." But because you wanted that moment, the characters suddenly make a bunch of decisions that lead to a really odd and unexpected ending.
Yeah, but anyway, Tomb Kings fight vampire counts and other Tomb Kings. Big war breaks out. Nagash or Cetra throws down with Archon the Black, kills him. That would have been awesome if it would have been a permanent kill on Archon. Of course, he just immediately comes back because Archon. But Cetra kills him, and then it turns out that was a ploy. And Nagash. Yep, Nagash manifests inside of Khemri, and then he somehow finds the door to the underworld in Khemri.
I hate it.
And he goes down to Itzu Sirian after a big fight, and it's very weird and unnecessary. Like we don't. If
that single god is so important, and all the rest of them should be too, it undermines and creates stories that the whole.
Yeah, we don't have time for the Tomb King pantheon.
Okay, I mean, there is, I think, an entire stream in how important the gods end up being because of some of the individual elements of the end times.
Yeah,
but they sideline all the rest of them because of the one they focused on, and it's really strange.
Yeah, like, and there's some cool bits. Like, there's a mention about how Thra had literal angelic beings as functionally his greater demons, and it's like, that sounds cool. But we don't get to see them because turns out Nagash killed them way back during the original war and made them into super monsters that are very cool looking. But like, he could have just done that during the end times, and it would have made a lot more sense. But anyway, But anyway, so Cetra has his final battle with Nagash. It's fantastic. It has one of the best pieces of art in the entirety of the end times, where you have Nagash like looming over Cetra and Cetra being like, fucking bring it on. It also has one of the best lines in the end times, where Nagash is like, hey, let's team up. We both hate chaos. And Cetra says Cetra will not serve. Like Cetra's like, I will literally burn everything is if I do not get to be king, which like,
and that is a good line.
That
shows how pride comes before the fall. That is the sort of shit that the entire end times, in many respects, should have been. Lots of people who could have won, not winning because of their pride, because of hubris, because of whatever individual character flaws that they have. And the Warhammer world is built on people who have cracks in their otherwise perfect visages. And that is what should have brought about the end. And it's something that we've discussed in previous streams, where we were, for example, discussing what could have happened with Malekith and Grombrindal and various other individuals, and how they could have been effectively responsible for burning the world around them because of their pride, because of their hatreds, because of all the wars that had come beforehand, because chaos had seeped into everyone and the fissures had come up through them. That should have been the end. And this, I think, is a perfect example of that. Cetra does not take the knee.
Yep. And so Nagash literally rips him piece from piece and literally just destroys Kimry to make a point, which, like, fair. All right. And then they all leave. And then for some reason, the Dark Gods come in and go, hey, Cetra. And they because Cetra doesn't die weirdly. Like, his body gets ripped asunder, but he's just there, I guess, even though he should have died instantly. Because his body is what keeps his soul safe. It's in his body. But when Nagash destroys his body, he just stays there.
Hey, I'm Cetra.
So the Dark Gods put Cetra back together and say, hey, you should serve us instead. And we get this beautiful piece of art that shows Cetra watching the sunset, and with no explanation of what he's doing. And you'd think, oh, wow, that's the final page. That's a really cool plot hanger. Like, what's Cetra going to do? Like, did the Dark Gods put him back? Like, presumably, wow, maybe they just put him back so he can undermine Nagash or something. So here's a fun fact. If you don't read the individual novels, Cetra never comes back. He gets resurrected and does
nothing.
In the novels, he returns to save Nagash, which completely goes against what he did earlier. And he says, yeah, the Dark Gods resurrected me and told me to serve them. So out of a fuck you to them, I'm going to help you beat them. Then I'm going to kill you. Which, like, why bring him back for just that? It's pointless.
I'm just going to bring this one up just to add one little line, all because of what was put in place by others, which would be easily undone by Nagash at the peak of his power.
Do you hear the part where I said where Nagash flattened Kimry into dust?
There's just nothing left.
There's no pyramid of Cetra left.
Yeah, Nagash at this point is effectively a god, and life and death is pretty much in the palm of his hands by the way that it's written. Death is now his province. He's almost set up as the character that he's going to become in the Age of Sigmar. He is almost there. And no, there is no coming back for anyone that he doesn't want to come back. Cetra should be dead.
Yeah. So anyway, now, fun fact, the next few books are very easy to fast forward through because they're so short, which also is a big flaw of the end times. Is the first book is so big and, like, yeah, it has its problems, but at least it's awesome and detailed and fun. Glotkin is a single siege, basically.
I actually hate this book.
Yeah, so do I. It is my least favorite book overall because it's it's out of a 5-part series to wipe out the entire world. It focuses on the fall of technically like 3, but in reality 1 empire city, which does not, it's like, what a waste. Also, virtually none of the characters are returning characters. They are all brand new characters, which, what the fuck? It's the end of days. Use the characters we already have.
Here comes Age of Sigmar.
Yeah, instead, the Glotkin. And the reason the Glotkin shows up is because in Age of Sigmar, he's the first big bad. Like, they were setting up for the first edition of Age of Sigmar. So the Glotkin shows up out of nowhere. There's no build up to him. He literally just shows up and is Archaon's, like, big lieutenant of Nurgle, which, like, what?
What the fuck?
who the fuck is the Glotkin? And he's like, oh yeah, you're my big bad now. Here, take this. Now, in the Age of Sigmar, the Glotkin is awesome. He's an Age of Sigmar character, in my opinion, which is like, a lot of people are like, oh, I want him in Total War. I don't.
Festus is there as well, just to bring up Sotek's card.
Oh, and
so core part there.
Yeah, the Glotkin invades, and this leads to a really weird thing in the end times where Nurgle and Khorne get a lot of attention, and Tzeentch and Slaanesh could just get totally fucking ignored.
I'll answer that with you really think the Gash isn't going to be popping up in Total War Warhammer?
Yeah.
I mean, he's going to come up at some point, and I'm going to guess he's not going to be the advisor.
Yeah. No, the advisor is Dodgy Johan. That's just a fact. He's Dodgy Johan. And if you're like, who the fuck is Dodgy Johan? Go watch Lawhammer and you'll understand. But anyway, so the Glotkin invades the Empire with a 3-pronged invasion because Nurgle, so 3. One invasion is led by the Glotkin, brand new character. Another invasion is led by the 3 Magath Riders, 3 completely brand new characters. And the last invasion is led by, oh my god, I cannot remember his name all of a sudden. The Tentacle Lord, another brand new character. So all of the big Nurgle characters who lead all of the invasions are completely brand new characters that you've never heard of before the end times. Thank you, Gutrot Spume.
Gutrot Spume, that's it.
Yeah, I love Gutrot Spume. But Gutrot Spume is also a fairly minor Norscan warlord who's very Nurgly and has like a really cool ship. And he controls a plague fleet, which plague fleets are very well established parts of the lore. I have no problem with Gutrot Spume.
I had a huge plague fleet from Man of War. Great.
Yeah, the Magath Lords and the Glotkin were very unnecessary because they come out of nowhere. So they invade. The Magath Lords destroy Talabheim.
Not first.
So the Glotkin destroys Marienburg.
Okay, comes through Marienburg first.
So he goes around the ocean route. He destroys Marienburg and then makes his way up the river to Altdorf. The Magath Lords come down the mountains. They go through Brass Keep. They get all of the new Nurgle guys from Brass Keep, which like, all right, fine. Sure. And then they make their way down to Talabheim, and they destroy it by summoning Epidemius, which like, cool, but like Epidemius should have just been there in the first place. What the fuck? Anyway, so they summon Epidemius, and Epidemius like instantly wins the fight because Talabheim is like kind of a bull, and he just goes, what if I just make it rain disease pus until the bowl fills up and everybody dies?
Talabheim's in a giant crater. It's called the Eye of the Forest, and the crater's got a circumference of about 100 miles. It's about 30 miles across, as this great enormous bowl, and the city itself is over on the left hand, over on the west,
which is a very not epic or fun way for Talabheim to die.
It's a shit way, given that Talabheim has never fallen pretty much ever. The only time it came close was in a computer game in Mark of Chaos. And in Mark of Chaos, it's the primary center. And lots of fun with that one. And it's a place that's become so integrally built into Warhammer that it was a shame to see it just kind of go as a footmark, given just how much time they then spent on bloody Altdorf.
Yep. And then I don't even remember what the fuck Gutrot Spume. Gutrot Spume recruits the Beastman. That's right. He meets the Harbinger.
Who, to be fair, all the way through, and all the big spikes come flying out the forest.
To be fair, the Harbinger is a well-established pre-character, but he's not a special character per se. But he is mentioned a lot in the lore. Now, I really wish they had used like a more Nurgle character, like I don't know, fucking the Famine Fiend would have been way cooler, and would have made a lot more sense. But anyway,
and again, if you're looking to be a celebration of all that is Warhammer, what you also want to do is not just speak to whatever the current flavor of the day is. You want to dive into the older lore and pull back some old shit, like say Lothar Bubonicus, a character that was kicking around all the way back in 3rd edition of Warhammer. Pulling out him on a palanquin of Nurgle and really doing something cool and funky with that would have been loads of fun. And that would have made old fans go, ooh, exciting. Look, here's a new model for that thing. What hasn't been seen for about 35 years.
Where was Valnir?
Yeah, for example.
Anyway,
there's loads of good examples of what they could have done, but just chose to make some new shit up because they were heading towards, very clearly at this point, Age of Sigmar.
Yeah, so Siege of Altdorf happens, also known as the Fall of Altdorf. Names on the tin, Altdorf falls. Karl Franz is killed by the Glotkin, and then literally the second he dies, his body is hit by a comet that's been like seen in the sky for a while, and it turns out the comet was Sigmar, and Sigmar. It is later revealed that Sigmar possesses the corpse of Karl Franz and uses him as a puppet.
He becomes Zombie Jesus,
which is not. I hate it. I hate it so much.
I cannot dislike this particular plot thread more if I tried.
I will say, the Fall of Altdorf, as far as like the overall battle, has a lot of fun parts. Like Vlad von Karstein coming to the city's defense and being like, well, technically I'm the Electric of Sylvania, so I'm going to help. And everyone's like, fine. Like, I love that part. The last charge of Pretonia, fucking awesome. With King Lewin Lewinker showing up, and like he has his throwdown with Kugoth. One of my favorite fights in the end times is Kugoth Plaguefather versus Lewin. That is a bitchin' fight. And Lewin then gets immediately murked by Festus.
Yeah. I mean,
who then is murked by Vlad, which is just like, all right.
I get why Altdorf is such a primary focus, given that Warhammer has focused on the Empire in its various products again and again and again. But if you're wanting to make Altdorf the focus of one of your books, make it the conclusion, not make it a footnote along the way. It put too much focus by book 2 on one part of the world that, in the greater scheme of the entire world, didn't matter. It was just the fall of another major city, and there's fucking loads of them in the Warhammer world. And the events that occur here are not really that interesting, other than a couple of the cool fights. There was 1,000 other things they could have done, and the focus here was mental.
Yeah, so that's basically the end of that book. The third book is about pretty much the Elven Civil War. Nagaroth is lost to the hordes of Nagaroth is lost to the hordes of Khorne, and Malekith says, okay, fuck this, we're gonna go invade Ulthuan one last time.
I hate that storyline, the whole thing.
Yeah, so they invade. It's a mess. It's literally a mess. Lilith literally kicks everything off. Once again, I've talked about how much she sucks. She goes on and on about the war in heaven, and that the elven gods had a civil war, and that those exact same things are repeating now. And so her whole thing is to try and like remove herself from it, which is why she has Tekla stand in for her, which leads to a bunch of shenanigans, which doesn't make any fucking sense. And
there's so much potential good in here. And this is the book that killed me. The whole Glockkin nonsense was fine, but it was just weirdly focused. And there was a lot,
teeny tiny book, very tiny.
It's really short. There's a lot of potential good in there, but this book is just filled with nonsense after nonsense and lots of character decisions by established characters that go against their character. Malekith is just up and down like a bloody roller coaster, making some great decisions and some really weird ones. And the whole destruction of Nagaroth is actually crazy.
Happens off screen for anyone curious.
It does, all off screen, even the first steps of it, and the chaos arrives, but nobody really spots them. Why? Because nobody really spots them, because those who normally spot them are doing something else. What are they doing? Shh, nobody really spots them. They come running in, and what happens? Everyone dies, but what about everyone else? No, everyone's dead now. Shh, we've got other things to go do. But wait a minute, what the fuck happened here? I mean, they have stood for countless millennia. They are fully aware of the traps and the tricks of chaos. They have been doing this forever. Why did they fail? Why are you asking questions? It's already happened. Dude, move on. And that's what it feels like when you read through it. It's just skipped over so quickly.
Yep. So War in Ulthuan happens where the elves get fused back into elves and then split among the Cain elves and the non-Cain elves. And they go very large links and bounds to reveal that all of the elven gods are actually no longer gods. They have all taken mortal forms, and all of them are revealed over the course of the Cain book, and all of them die. Which, like, so yeah, no, it's no longer an Athel Lauren thing. It's just elven gods are just mortals now.
No, see, I have no issue with the elven gods having avatars and working through them, because I can build really good stories around that. But doing reveals to destroy, it's just terrible storytelling. They could have had a really good moment where, this is what's happening. This is how it's going to occur. Look at what we're now bringing to the final battle, because ultimately that's what these books should be about. These books shouldn't be about individual battles and the destruction of individual characters. They should be building up. They're heading towards the final battle, the end of the world. And this is a perfect opportunity to do that, to say the elves were broken, they were shattered. Thousands of years of civil war has rent them to their core. They destroy Ulthuan, because Ulthuan has to be destroyed in the end times, because it's Atlantis. It's Atlantis, and Atlantis sinks. This should be an event of such massive calamity that the entire world feels the ramifications of it, because obviously the vortex itself is going down, but beyond that, when you sink an entire continent, that's going to do things beyond your earthquakes, the tidal waves. This is proper cataclysmic end of the world bullshit. This is stuff. Yep. Yep.
No, I just want to add, nothing happens, by the way, when Ulthuan sinks to everywhere else in the world. There's no tsunami.
Yes, totally.
Not a big deal. It's just
that's why I'm saying this is what should happen. And then we get the shattered remnants of their people behind a chastened Phoenix King, who has finally realized what he has to be.
Eternity King.
Yeah, the Eternity King. Whatever. We've got a host of people that are broken, but they have their gods. And their gods walk amongst them, finally expressing themselves in the end times. That's a fucking cool story. There's something there that's really massive. But what do? Lilith, Lilith, Lilith. All the rest are dead. Lilith, Lilith, Lilith. Other dimension, Lilith. Oh, all the lore we have. It's a bit bullshit, actually, because Lilith knows what's really going on. Lilith. Oh, Lilith kills herself for a tiny little ritual that doesn't matter for an event that doesn't occur. Oh, by the way, the end. What the fuck?
Yeah,
Did I just read that?
If anyone wants some highlights on how the elven gods die, Aerith Kial is the lore disagrees with itself, where one author says, oh yeah, no, she thinks she's Manfred thinks he turns an elf, Eldria, Tyrion Squire, into a vampire, but no, he didn't. It's just that she's the embodiment of Aerith Kial, so she kind of appears like a vampire, but she's not a vampire. And then another author went, no, she is a vampire. And because she's a vampire elf, she feels bad and is like, oh, I'm an abomination. And she says, hey, Tyrion, I feel bad. And he goes, oh, okay. And he chops her head off.
Bullshit.
Then the embodiment of Mathlan gets captured on a black ark. And he goes, oh, well, yeah, you captured me, but I'm Mathlan. And he creates a tsunami that destroys a lot of the elven guys, but also kills him for some reason.
Because that makes sense.
And Vol puts up a really big fight against like all of these elves in the first big fight between Alariel and Tyrion, because Alariel being Aisha and Tyrion's like, I'm going to capture you and I'm going to reperform the event known as the Rape of Aisha and like capture you and all this shit. And so they have this big fight and Tyrion hilariously gets grabbed by Durthu and like yeeted way far away. But yeah, that whole thing, the way Vol dies is that Vol knows he's going to die, right? According to prophecy, and he's fighting and he's unstoppable. Nobody can touch him. He's just beating the shit out of everyone. He's kicking ass. He's taking names. He's unstoppable. And then this makes me laugh because it's so goofy. He bodies like a whole contingent of elves. And Aeroloth is like, good job, Vol. And Vol turns and looks at him and is just kind of like, yeah, sorry, I die now. And a sister of slaughter gets up. She was pretending to be dead. She stands up and she stabs Vol in the back and he dies.
There's some serious bullshit going on there. Yes.
He knew she was there. He just didn't do anything. He was like, all right, yeah, I gotta go.
All right, I'm going to pull up Godzilla's comment because we should do. Thanks very much, Godzilla. You rock. And we somehow, this is worth covering too. And we somehow got to believe Chaos Dwarves and Grand Cathay got the shit kicked out by Grimgor. One faction with weapons of mass destruction and the other with dragon fucking demigods. Yeah, well, so if anyone is going to destroy anything, it's the greenskins. Yeah, fair enough. They can build themselves an enormous and yeah, it is one way of doing it. But if you're only doing it because you're not sure what's over there, which is pretty much the case, or you don't care, which is the case for the Chaos Dwarves, it's a very, very shit way of saying, and then all those other people over there, we don't know what happened to them. We just killed them with greenskins.
Yeah, everyone got killed by Skaven or greenskins, functionally.
Yeah, pretty much.
Chaos barely got to kill anybody, hilariously. But
for the end of the world, the big fat last battle was surprisingly lacking.
Yeah, I will say that I do think Grimgor killing Zarnagrind makes sense. It just sucks that it happened off screen.
Yeah, it really does make sense, because if you're going to bring down the Chaos Dwarves, it should be the slave uprising. That's how it should end. It should be the Black Orcs that bring it down, their own creations, that bring down Zarnagaran. That's what should happen.
Grimgor returning home, because that's where he's from.
Yeah, totally.
Returning home to finish what he started. Great, cool.
Perfect. In fact, I don't just love it. I think that is a wonderful story. And I love the idea of Grimgor in general. I just don't like the execution, as is often the case here.
Yeah. Also, they have this whole prophecy about the chosen of Mork and the chosen of Gork, and they just decide to completely ignore that.
They just disappeared. Where's that goes? Oh, look, huge prophecy. It's probably him. Oh, huge. Morka, Gorka. Oh, I've forgotten now. Wait, what was that? Don't worry about it. The world will end. We'll sort of hint at that come the next game.
Yeah. So anyway, the vortex gets undone by Teclis because he realizes that he's like, oh yeah, we need to like make incarnates now. Like we just have to. So he rips apart the vortex and he tries to put all of the winds into elves, being a cheeky little bastard, but he only gets 3 of them. Actually, no, he gets 3. So he takes the Lore of Light into his staff, which like
very line to interrupt there, and I totally understand that. Where Total War Warhammer is also not my one. My one, Total War Warhammer for me is a culmination of all. In many respects, it's what the end times possibly should have been. It's all the things from Warhammer and celebrated and thrown into a single game. Now, does it all make sense? No. But is it awesome? Yeah.
One day we will have a Total War Warhammer verse stream with Andy because it actually has a really interesting story that's kind of hidden beneath the surface, but we don't have time for it right now. Anyway, so the vortex creates the incarnates, and this is what a lot of people have asked for our opinions about as far as like what we would have done, because the incarnates is kind of a fun idea of like the winds of magic are forced into people who become embodiments of, and they're gods, like they're functionally gods.
Yes.
Because actual gods don't get to do anything in the end time, so they make magic gods instead.
It's really weird, actually, because they put so much strength previously on what the gods are and how they're important, and Nagash consuming a god. And then they go, yeah, gods, we've got a whole bunch of other ones, but we're going to forget about them now. And instead, we're going to make our own.
Yeah, the Empire gods, fun fact, literally do nothing. Like, they show up in Glotkin because Tal is getting, like, infected by Nurgle and is dying. But then the fall of Altdorf, the Empire wins, technically. And the Glotkin is defeated, and Tal heals, like Shalia gets freed from Nurgle's realm and all this shit. Like they heal Tal, and you're like, wow, Tal's back in the fight, and he never does anything else.
He's just gone. Pain in the neck. Thanks, Swope.
Yeah, Swap. Yeah. That is. Yeah, there is an off-screen note that Jules Le Breton and Abarash team up along with the Red Duke and like every still living Bretonian and like Blood Dragon character, and they make some epic final stand somewhere against something. And we have no idea what that's about, and it never gets talked about.
Yeah, totally. And Hammond, Grimgor. Mine is pretty much. I quite like Grimgor and where he got used. It was pretty good. Anyway, back to where we were.
Yeah, so the Incarnates end up being Malekith was supposed to receive the Wind of Fire, but it breaks free of Teclis' control because and instead he grabs the Wind of Shadow and throws it into Malekith. So Malekith becomes the Incarnate of Shadow, which like cool, fine, fair. Alario becomes the Incarnate of Life, probably the most obvious pick of obvious, especially because her and Ariel are not bad person. Mm-hmm. And then Teclis somehow takes the Lore of Light into his staff, which, wow, what a staff. I know it's the staff of Lilith, but wow, that's impressive, I guess. And so the other winds escape. So the Wind of Beasts goes off into the east, and it eventually roots itself into Grimgor Ironhide, which is
wild.
It's a thing.
I really dislike it.
Yeah, we'll come back around to that in a second. And then because it's a whole thing. The Wind of Fire finds its way to Karak Kadrin, where it eventually goes into Ungrim Iron Fist. After
we're setting up Age of Sigmar there.
Yep. And then the Lore of Metal, or the Wind of Metal goes to Karazakarak, where it absorbed into the Throne of Power, and by extension, Thorgrim Grudgebearer. The Wind of... Who am I still missing? The Wind of... Heavens, right, ended up somehow getting out and going to the comet that was already in the sky, but was not a thing, but now is it a thing? It's not exactly clear how that happened, but it happened, and it slams into Karl Franz, and turns out Sigmar was the Wind of Heavens all along.
Of course he was, because that makes sense.
Yeah,
And the wind of killing the future.
Yeah,
that sounds like Sigmar.
Yeah, because yeah, man, that they really stretched that comment.
Yeah, they really have.
Excuse me. And then the last wind is death, which of course Nagash already took out.
Nagash, totally. And a quick luring line. Thanks very much. There. Oh, really? Not sure what you're O'Reillying at there. If someone could clarify, if you could.
He was O'Reillying at the a stream about the Total War lore.
Oh, right. Well, that'd be the case. Absolutely. And prologue when? Prologue to my campaign? If that's the case, that will come in time. Don't just trust me.
Yeah, your playthrough of the prologue.
That. Oh, now I understand what you're talking about. That's I was trying to play it the other day and it was stuttering a bit, and I didn't think it would make a very good stream. So we'll see. We're still discussing how best to do that behind the scenes.
Yeah. So with that, I will say, I don't know how Andy feels about this. I honestly am fine with the idea of incarnates. I do like, cool, fine, whatever. The idea of
I'm also fine with it. I really like the idea of attempting to do this. I'm not fine that the only reason that they did it was to set up effectively Age of Sigmar.
The AOS.
And it's really quite obvious that that's what they're doing. I'm also not fine with the fact that it got so centralized on characters that were so very, very focused on that very small part of the world. It's
Mornington Crescent, thank you for the 100 bits as well.
I missed that. Oh yeah, there it is. Let me bring that up. Thank you. I was too busy being fine.
I think there's certainly an argument there.
I think there's a good argument there.
This is a question that a lot of people have asked us, so we're gonna go ahead and dive into it. Of Andy, if at gunpoint you were forced to choose 8 characters to be the incarnates of the 8 winds that stand against chaos, who would you apply to which wind?
Okay, so we've got a really interesting situation here. And that is we have ourselves 8 winds of magic, arguably more if you dive into the deeper lore. Let's just say we've got our 8 winds of magic that are coming through from the Chaos Gates, and we're going to do the classic storytelling thing. It's what Teclis did when he came over to the Empire, and he said, hey, Empire, see all your wizards? They use chaos, and we need to have chaos to fight chaos. So what we're going to do is we're going to take some of your wizards and teach them how to be proper wizards, and we're going to use them to face off against Azavar Kul, the 12th ever chosen. So this is already Teclis's thing, and he's had a good 200 years to build up to this point, and he goes, you know what? We're losing. The world is going to come to an end. We have got to use chaos against chaos. So that's why I'm not against the idea. It makes sense for the character. It takes upon story beats that have come from the past, and it then uses them in a new way. That is brilliant. So Teclis draws upon the winds, and somehow he gets past all that nonsense and manage to create incarnates. Love it. Now, where do they go? Now, each of the 8 winds would be from Teclis's perspective. I think, agreeably, he would almost certainly want to channel those into creatures that he thinks could absolutely cope with it. And he is a mortal man with mortal limitations. He will only have the awareness of what he has. And that is that elves are almost certainly the best repository for this shit. That will be his perspective. But he's also aware that elves themselves are fundamentally broken. In that they are constantly working against each other. But when push comes to shove, come the end of the world, they will stand together, hopefully. So his first step being elves 100% makes sense. So if we're going under the story of it, as in, for example, we're looking just at the characters that are around him and what he would attempt to do, it would be, as blunt as I can make it, whoever the fuck he can get. Now, I know that doesn't necessarily make the best story, but you can change the story that leads up to this point to make sure that the story works really well. There's lots of important elven princes and lots of important elven mages. You got to remember that he is the Loremaster of Hoeth, the High Loremaster of Hoeth, and he has underneath him hundreds of fucking wizards, okay, who has studied. He knows them all from the last 200 years of, well, it's not 200, but 150 years of leading the fuckers. The previous High Lore Master passing over the title to him. He knows all of them. The chance that he wouldn't be able to pluck individual ones is just beyond stupid. He would know exactly who is the best to inhabit each. So if we're just purely talking about the story completely misses the point and just goes, who's the coolest character that has the most points? We'll give it to him. And that's largely the route that they went with for the books. What would actually happen is that Teclis would choose the best people for it, and probably not himself, because he carries the curse of fucking Cain. He is broken. He would not choose himself. And I think that would speak to his character, a character of sacrifice, someone who realizes he has to do the best for the world. And then he almost certainly would be in a position where he has to take it on himself because no one else is capable of handling it. And I think that makes a great story. The staff is stupid. It's beyond stupid. I hate it.
Yeah. Well, it gets even more stupid, but we'll get into that in a minute.
Yeah. So we've got that. But we're then moving beyond that as a setup to what would you do if you could just pick individual characters?
Yeah, okay, so let's assume,
because that's where we really want.
Let's assume the situation is so dire, Teclis has to pick immediate individuals, and he can't choose all of them.
Different story. Let's pick that he pulls off and peels apart the winds, and he intends to throw them into the elves, but the winds are beyond his control, which I think is an obvious step. Yeah, and they instead go to the best souls that are living in the entire Warhammer world. Completely different setup. And he has no control, and they just tear off in different directions. So the light wind goes to the best representation of white. The bright wind goes to the single mortal that best represents that. And the spell is attached to those individual souls. If we make that actually ridiculous, almost certainly could never come about, spell come to pass, then that's much more interesting and fascinating.
Yes. I like this version. Continue.
Yeah, I figure you might. So for me, let's go round the circle. Top of the circle is what? Light, as I recall. So light, wind.
Light.
Okay, so let me just quickly pull up the comment because you don't want to miss the comments. Hey, Hammond, thank you very much. Hey, Andy, Lord of Chariots goes to who?
I think Andy only knows half of those characters.
No, I know them all. I'm going Cetra.
You know Sithara, Belkek?
I do, but let's move on. I'm getting all caught up. So first, our lore of light. If it's our lore of light, we want somebody who is pure. We want someone who is a manifestation of purity, intellect, the ultimate lack of emotion. Someone that is almost divine in his direct. It's Mazdamundi. I mean, it just is. The lore of light falls into Mazdamundi. He is the perfect representative. He has no emotion. The lore of light has no real emotion lying behind it. One of the biggest issues that light wizards have is that they become more philosophical and more distant from everything around them. It's not logical, step by step. That's the lore of Shamon. We're looking at somebody who is going to be a representation of everything that stands almost as a figurehead of all that's holy as well. It's Mazdamundi. He pretty much is. And I can look around lots of other very holy characters all around the world, but they all miss one of the important parts, and that's the separation of their emotion. They're not cold-blooded. You want to get that cold-blooded feel there. What do you think of the Lord of Light?
Well, I like that a lot. And I also like the representation of like how it would appear from the Lizardman's perspective of like, it would be like the sun itself is unleashing this blessing of light upon Mazdamundi, but it's also like, it's not the warmth of the sun, but it's instead that cold intellectual light of the old ones themselves and yada, yada, yada. I like that a lot. Whenever I've been kind of forced to work with this list, I usually
until the wind comes, and it would have been, I think, a really fun characterization change.
Yeah, and that's the thing. The other thing, the end times, like it kind of tried to do the smallest bit, and then it just completely forgot about it. Is that the winds would dramatically alter the people they went into?
Yes,
like the end times kind of plays around with it, where it's like, oh, Teclis wanted the Lore of Fire to go into Malekith because he thought it would bring out his best bits, but instead he gets the Lore of Shadow, which causes not necessarily his worst bits, but some of the not as great parts of his nature to be inflamed. But then it kind of just completely abandons those ideas as we get later into the end times because they didn't want to keep up with it. But I actually like that a lot, because when I usually think about this question, I don't give myself, I think, the luxury of being like, oh, I'll pick whoever I want. Instead, I'm like, okay, my goal has always been to try and I'm going to try and pick one character from every race. Or
yeah,
like
you almost can't help yourself.
Yeah, like I want a wind to go to, like every race gets a wind. But I like that a lot, because initially it's like, if you have like, if at gunpoint Games Workshop was like, oh, you have to run with the Sigmar plot of like someone has to represent Sigmar, then I would have been like, I guess I'd make Karl Franz the embodiment of the Lore of Light from like the holiness perspective. But no, I like Mazdamundi a lot more.
Yeah. So I drop in Mazdamundi there, and I would have it fundamentally return him to the state that the old ones wanted him to be. That this was actually the great plan, and this is what gives him the ability to do what needs to be done, which is how the very first book, Nagash, states the Lizardman position is Exodus, in that they see the great comet coming, they go, it's all gone wrong. The great plan has gone wrong. We need to leave. Their whole point is they need to leave. They don't. They end up fighting Skaven for fucking ever.
Yeah, they leave at the last second, which
it's proper crazy what they actually do. But this would have been the point where Mazdamundi becomes almost an effigy of what the old ones were originally intending this land to be. He returns to type. The chaos of the old world as it stands finally settles in him and allows him to execute Exodus. And they activate the engines of the old ones, and the Lizardmen fuck off. They're gone. And I think that is an unexpected potential outcome for what the unleashing of the winds would have been. For some, it will be fight, and for others, it will be flee. And the Lizardmen have access to shit that no one else does. It's time for them to go.
Do you think, because like a part of me feels like there are some that would have stayed, like of the Lizardmen?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like I almost think like I would have had Mazdamundi stay around for the final fight.
I wouldn't have. I'd have had him because he's the walking representation of everything that's left of the old ones. I would have made him realize he had made an error. Because he is infallible and he thinks he's infallible. And I would have allowed that infallibility to hit its actual point. The whole point of this land is their infallibility. I quite like that as a step up, but you know,
how am I going to have my Council of Incarnates if he leaves?
Yeah, quite. And you know what? Yeah, tough to that, because I'm quite happy to break that. Plus, once he goes, the wind potentially lashes out to something else. Because he's gone. So you could potentially get your council anyway. So next wind is Shamon. Do you want to go on this one first?
Yeah, I will say I personally very much love the idea that it's drawn to the Throne of Power. I like the idea very, very much that the Rune of Azamar is such an insane concentration of magic, and that I like the idea that Throne of Power probably has a lot of runes that don't work anymore because there's not enough magic left in existence for them too. But when the Wind of Shaman is drawn to it, because it is this ultimate expression of what the Wind of Metal is capable of manipulating the winds into all these really interesting different forms, and these the processes that Grugni used to create like an ultimate expression of smithing, forging, inventiveness, creativity, it sparks to life, and all of a sudden all these runes that have been hidden for thousands of years just flare to life. And whoever's sitting on the throne is the incarnate of metal. Of like, I do like the idea that Thorgrim's on it, and potentially Thorgrim ends up dying for some reason, and somebody else has to take the throne. And there's like a really interesting story to tell there of who would be worthy amongst the apocalypse should the High King fall. Who would step into that void? And I think there's a fun story to explore there. But I would say, in a sense, the throne is the incarnate, because no dwarf could be an incarnate.
So I broadly agree here, which is interesting because I didn't expect I was going to. What I would look for is for a representation, because in the end, what you're looking for is each one of the winds to go to the faction, I suppose, that actually represents them, and the forges, the logic, the step-by-step process is the greed. Don't forget the greed is the dwarfs. It has to go to the dwarfs, but the dwarves themselves will repulse the wind, which means that you need to create some fashion around which that the dwarves can manifest this wind in a different way, which is why each one of the winds needs to have its own story, so to speak. The pure, light, ephemeral, strange, weird ones are the lizardmen. The ones who represent crafting, fashioning stuff, the bang, 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 the alchemy of it all, if you will, is the dwarfs as a faction. So you'd want them to have it, which means that you're going to have to look at the runesmiths. They are ultimately the ones who are going to channel it. And the throne of power, or an anvil of doom, or something, perhaps even the Nemesis crown itself.
Oh God, bringing back the Nemesis crown would have been sick.
For me, I would probably drop it on the Nemesis crown, because ultimately Alaric the Mad has been attached to all of the most important dwarven artifacts in the lore, if not necessarily for the dwarfs, in that they created the Rune Fangs, arguably created Galmaraz, but then everybody arguably created Galmaraz. Scalf Blackhammer arguably created Galmaraz.
Yeah, or Thugni. Yeah,
or
like
exactly.
Did, yeah.
Or even Svednir. I mean, who knows who did it, but arguably created Galmaraz, and I would ultimately drop it potentially there. You have an option of dropping it onto Galmaraz as another option as well. But for me, it would probably be the Nemesis crown, and for one reason only: you can put that fucker on your head, and that's awesome. And it also ties in the old Nemesis crown campaign. So if you're looking for the
Games Workshop would have had to admit it to it existing. That's why they would be like, never.
But if you're looking for the end times to be a representation of everything that came before, I think that's a beautiful way to tie in that old plot line and also speak to Alaric the Mad, the time of Sigmar, and all those cool stories.
The only reason I would agree is because of the bringing back the crown campaign and acknowledging it as a celebration of everything that's happened in Warhammer. Otherwise, I still prefer the Rune of Azamar. But
I get that, and I don't think that's a bad idea. That is not one where I'd go, no. I'm like, that's great. I love it. Love it. So next is Azir, the wind of
Azir is tough. Azir is fucking.
This is the tough one now. Azir is a wind of seers. It's a wind of the heavens. It's a wind of telling the future. It's the winds of the bolt from the blue. It's the wind of lightning as well. You could argue a wind of wind. To a degree. And what you'd be looking then for is something that can fly, something that's airborne, something that's directly tied to seeing the future, who is capable of seeing what lies next. And this is something I think that I would almost certainly build up towards. You'd be looking for the faction that most speaks to seeing the future and having seers. And we have a couple here, some of which may be unexpected. For example, the Skaven. The very heart of the Skaven. I told you I was going to go controversial. The very heart of the Skaven is that they all have seers. They are given insights. They will inherit. It even mentioned this, and I didn't actually expect it. I reread this 2 days ago when I was quickly boning up. I was like, they've even got the "we shall inherit" written in there, their ascension, which has been prophesized its times before by the horned rat. Their entire species is based upon knowing what happens next. Another one that's very much laced upon prophecy is the lizardmen, but we've already given one to the lizardmen, and you kind of want to move on. So as much as I would like to dwell on the lizardmen, I'd almost certainly move off. The next and clearly most obvious one is the wood elves. The wood elves and the elves in general are often working towards prophecy, the influence of the gods, seeing the next step. And this is arguably a really good place for it, because as you look around the rest of the other species, our dwarves, if we go over to Cathay, if we go over to Nippon, and none of them are really talking about beyond the astromancers of Cathay, but they're not core to the people. So
it's like it would have been interesting to see how Cathay would play into it, as far as like the Celestial Dragon Emperor being like the big bad of Azir, or Yuan Bo being like this extremely powerful caster and embodiment of Azir.
And I think that that's pretty cool, but in many respects doesn't speak to the wind, although Age of Sigmar almost changes the wind into Sigmar, and it's really weird. It's a very different style of how that approached.
Oh man, Azir is a weird win in AOS. Like, it's still Azir, but granted, it's more that Sigmar changes to fit Azir as opposed to Azir changing to fit Sigmar. Which is why he's a lightning god now. Like, he's basically Thor.
So ultimately, I would be looking for something that represents seeing the future, and I would probably go for that ephemeral next step. So your elves. So we're looking for the best elf seer. Well, so you're maybe looking at Naiath over in the Wood Elves. You're maybe looking for somebody else that gets built up during the course of the campaign. You're maybe looking at the god of... See, this is the one I find hardest, because there's not a core candidate.
Yeah, Azir is, as one might expect, the most difficult. Like, it's so ephemeral.
Because I would want, I mean, you'd want to have someone who can fly. Ariel can fly, but she's not Azir. You'd want to have something that's a representation.
Some people are saying Marathi.
Marathi is not really about seeing the future.
Yeah.
It's just not her shtick. Marathi's about control. Marathi's about a whole host of shit. I love Marathi so much.
I see a lot of people in chat saying like certain ogre characters. I love the ogres, and there is a relationship between them and Azir, undoubtedly. Like,
so you know what? I think we should move off because the next bunch are a lot easier.
We'll come back.
Okay, so you're first on Lord of Shadows.
Honestly, I felt Malekith was a pretty accurate pick for it as far as what the wind represents a lot to me. Yeah, Airloft would actually be kind of interesting. But like I do like the idea a lot of Malekith getting shadows, in that he kind of has this. Malekith is a very dark character who there are little bits and pieces scattered around him of trying to do the right thing, of trying to be this force of law imposing on the world, of a mastery of shadows in a lot of ways. There are people who I think are sneakier than him. There are people who I think are better than at like illusions than him, but he is like Be'lakor is like literally a lord of shadows, but I just refuse to use a chaos character for any of the incarnates.
I agree. I think
you know what?
Chaos.
Yeah, some people in chat brought up Bretonia could be interesting for Azir.
Yeah, I was
like the Fey Enchantress.
Once I shut up, I was like, it's the Fey Enchantress, isn't it?
Yeah. Honestly, yeah,
I was like, holy shit, I can't interrupt just to go Morgiana Le Fey. Fuck.
Yeah, no,
but
I agree. The Fey Enchantress.
That's it. I'm sold. It's the Fey Enchantress. That's who it should be.
we forgot about Bretonia, like Games Workshop. Yeah,
that's it. Interesting that you go for Malekith. I do not. For me, the lore of shadows is the lore of lies, the lore of deceit, the lore of treachery, the lore of illusions, the lore of basically stabbing some fucker in the back.
Okay, every single one of those but illusions, I feel, is very Malekith.
And I don't think so. Malekith is far more direct. And far more magic based in general. He's power. And he represents that power as well. He's puissant and he's strong. He's the fucking Phoenix King.
Yeah, but at the same time, the guy
tying
off the war
tying the Phoenix King to treachery to me is not what I would prefer. For me, it would be here we go. I'm going to go controversial again. Thankwall. Okay,
I said no chaos wizard.
Yeah, he's not chaos wizard. He's the horned rat is separate from chaos. Fuck you all. It is. Thankwall. Treachery, backstabbing.
We will never agree on that.
He literally, he's a wizard. He manifests shadows. He's constantly trying to trick others. A character like that for me is much better. Alithanar is a better option, but I don't want to have too many elves kicking around there. Alithanar is perfect, and then he even leads these shadow people. So he's someone else who's fighting from the shadows, and as an elf has a strong connection to it. So Alithanar works for me really rather well. If I look elsewhere, I would probably suggest this is where I would have liked the end times to be bigger than it actually is, and I would probably drop in someone like the Monkey King, someone who is utterly incapable.
That would have been interesting.
Pinned down as one thing, someone who's all about illusions and lying and treachery, and then maybe looking over to what potentially the Naga might end up being, and how they're slithering and slipping and dripping behind the scenes and being something else. But if I was going to choose from that large umbrella, it would be the Monkey King.
Interesting. That is very interesting. All right, who's next?
Next is Amethyst. Ooh, the Wind of Death. Well, it's super easy.
Yeah,
yeah, it's Nagash. And this is where they nailed it. It should be Nagash. And it also suggests to a perversion of either the Wind or Nagash, because the Wind of Death is more than Nagash alone. And I think there's a really interesting story there to tell about how much the Wind influences the character and how much the character is influenced by the Wind.
Okay, so just because people are asking, what about Marathi or Neferata for shadows?
Yeah, I mean the Lamians. Yeah, the Lamians are all about that, but Neferata is a little bit too in your face, and she's not about tricking people into thinking she's something else. too much. Compare that with, say, the Monkey King, who is constantly appearing as something else and reappearing as something. And even if you look at how Cathay views him, they have 4 different versions, maybe 5, of who the Monkey King is. That pretty much speaks to the lore of Shadows to me, where Neferata works from the shadows, but I don't think is shadows. I'd say that she'd definitely be in there as a potential.
What about Marathi, though?
Marathi, no. She's using deceit all the time, but she's far too blunt and obvious with it sometimes. She is far too closely tied as well to the whole hedonistic side that I don't think quite pops down for Marathi. And I'm just going to pull up one comment there because I just saw it pop up. The changeling, I would say, is chaos, so I would immediately push off. Ladriel, obviously, all of the gods of the elves will attach to one of the winds with ease. And I'm avoiding the gods in general because you kind of have to.
Okay, so yeah. Moving on from death, because we agreed on that. Who's next on the color wheel?
Actually,
fire. So, fire.
Your turn to go first.
I don't want to go first on fire.
This is where I think we definitely pull out a dragon. Okay, and the reason that we pull out a dragon here is because dragon is closely associated with fire. We're looking at stereotypes here. We're looking at things to manifest shit. And we're also looking for things that might be unexpected. In that you might expect the Dragon Emperor to be the one that attracts one of the winds, but no, it's one of his sons. And having one of them.
The Celestial Dragon Emperor, no.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of his sons. And having...
Yeah, Li Dao, the fire dragon.
The obvious choice here is Li Dao. And I think in many respects manifests actually far more strongly than, for example, the Goldwind is manifested by what's his face?
Zhao Ming. Yeah.
Thank you. And I think in many respects, sadly, a character that's not got quite as much depth as some of the others. But in some respects, that's to its advantage because you can then use it and show it through the course of how you would then paint this version of how Cathay falls and Grand Cathay becomes a horrible ruin like the rest of the world. And having him manifest and be somebody over on that side presiding over the defense would be, I think, a marvelous step and a good way of showing how the dragon thing effectively breaks up because you have to destroy Cathay. You have to actually destroy it, which means that you need to give an imbalance to that power network that they're used to. You've got to get the other dragons being upset, being disturbed by what's occurred, and providing a significant sink of power into him in the south, who is already jealous and annoyed about how the others have got advantages that he does not have. And now it's his time, for fuck's sake. He'll come forward. He's angry. He's burning. Perfect, I think.
Yeah, and actually would just kick that up to 11. And it would be interesting because he could potentially be a very aggressive force to a lot of other nations around there. Like, he wouldn't necessarily just be defending against chaos. He could also be a problem for like end and stuff like that of nations that potentially could be allies against chaos, but now they've got the incarnate of fire coming down there, kicking down their door. I do like that quite a bit. That's actually really interesting to me. And like fire, like to me, there's just really nothing in the West that really jumps out at me at all.
Yeah, I agree. I was thinking about this one earlier, and I was looking at all the various obvious characters, and there's some like those who are already possessed by the wind to a degree, but none of them are very compelling characters who are going to do much to progress the story, where I think this one would really help break down Grand Cathay in a way that most people wouldn't expect because of the jealousies between the various dragon siblings, and I think that would work really nicely.
Yeah, and that could also tell a very interesting story about when you get that Council of Incarnates moment of like Li Dao being a embodiment of Akshi who has done some really horrible shit, but also some really good shit, and he's probably in a really weird place emotionally when he finally arrives.
Yeah,
but
you can make for a really fun and compelling story from that, I think.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. Who's next?
Lorebeards.
Because
Lorebeards. I think it's Gur, and that's us done. I think that's us done the full ring. Pretty sure it is. Let me just go. Light gold. Yep, it's Gur. Gur's next. You want to go first again?
Gur can. There's a lot of places Gur can go. Of like with my no chaos rule, I count Beastman as chaos, so it can't go to Beastman, even though it would make sense for them.
It really would.
But there are a lot of bestial boys out there of like Personally, I would not ever have picked a green skin for the 8 wins. I would have done something very different with Gork and Mork. That would have been a lot of fun. I would have leaned very heavy into the prophecy of the chosen of Mork and Gork, and I would have done it with like a big goblin and a big green skin. I would have gone with Grimgor and Skarsnik and had a lot of fun with it. But for me with Gur, honestly, I probably would have gone to the ogres because I want an ogre rep, and they are the beasts. Mm-hmm. They are the devourers. They are the ultimate predators. They wiped out everything in their way. The whole thing for the end times is supposed to be the fire mouth erupts and they're like, it's time to march. And they go on the march towards the west because the east has been cut off, and they're aggressive. They're hungry. And like, I can even see a whole thing of like the wind of Gur appears over them and it drives them into this aggressive state. And they start like the big ogres, like Greasus and Scrag and all them are fighting each other, trying to figure out who's the top dog, who's the most predatory, who is that alpha. And there's a lot of different characters that could come out on top there. Like, I would probably go with Scrag or Greasus. Probably Scrag.
Greasus is a little bit too,
Greasus is a little too thinky, as hilarious as that is.
Yeah, Scrag is probably a better option. My biggest problem with Lorebeards and the Ogres is that there's not a clear candidate. And I think that might actually be a better way of resolving it. And I think you're absolutely spot on. It should be the Ogres. They are the closest in terms of the species that represents the wind. They are the closest in terms of the faction that you go, if I want the wind to go somewhere, it's that one. Again, I really agree that the orcs.
It's like, what is the great mob but a fucking huge animal? It's the ultimate predator.
Yeah, exactly. And the whole point of the ogres is that they hunt, is that they are wild. They have a wanderlust built into them, which you could argue is tied through to the grey wind or some other thing if you must, but you don't need to, because the good old Gur will do the majority of it for you. They're all covered in pelts. They are pretty much the manifestation of Gur. They even don't have higher intellect as it's understood by other species. They don't really have an imagination.
The whole thing that like Scrag is literally just someone that eats things and is butchered. Like, he literally just tears people apart and eats them to cast magic. Like, he is a horrifying bestial embodiment of a predator that uses violence and hunger as a form of offense, which is nuts.
Yeah, so I think that would be by far the most obvious choice. And it's the one, I mean, Scrag is probably your best bet when I look at it. I would potentially consider, I wouldn't want to do the Maw because the Maw is a god and you want to separate that and make a clear distinction between the two, which means that Scrag's probably your best bet. If you wanted to do something really left field and unexpected, this is where you do, and I'm going to go controversial given what I earlier said, a Beastman, and you have a Beastman that has not fallen to chaos. So you have yourself a Beastman that basically turns sides. So we get a turncoat. And that could be a really interesting way of bringing a very different conclave of all of our incarnates together, because we would have something very different sitting at the table. But not bringing the ogres to the table is stupid. It should be the ogres.
They deserve a seat.
Yeah, they deserve a seat. So ogres, thanks.
Yeah, that's interesting. And oh no, you know what? We didn't talk about life. That's the one that my brain. We skipped it. We skipped.
Did we skip life? Did we really skip life?
Yes, we did.
That is a crime.
Yeah, but I apologize. I would have said Ariel. I don't like Alariel as much as Ariel. I understand why they went with Alariel, but I would have had it be Ariel.
Right, so I agree completely, because we don't have a representation of the elves yet on the table. I think I might have skipped it because I thought the answer was so obvious, and my brain just went.
To be fair, it's and I'm most obvious behind
100% with you. There is an issue with Ariel. For all, I'm still choosing her as the obvious choice, and that's that she's a goddess. She is actually a god, and there's going to be various incarnate goddesses that are around. And if I'm using my imposed laws of avoiding gods, because at the second you go Ariel, you then go, well, wild, that goes to Orion, doesn't it?
What if we had her and Alariel fuse, but because Ariel is more powerful and a god, she's the one that is the dominant personality?
So I think if you're going to go with that story, you could do that, because then we then remove the god aspect, or alternatively, you just go to Alariel and you give it to her. You also have other potential answers from around the rest of the world, but none of them are compelling as to what the species mean. If we're looking for something that represents the lore of life, it is the wood elves or the elves in general. It should be aerial. And no matter how I try to avoid it, I full circle back. Where the wood elves do not represent Gur, they just have Gur as a part of who they are, but they don't represent it the same way.
Ariel is literally like, bitch lives in the Oak of Ages, and that is just the Wind of Life, like as a thing.
I desperately wish to avoid it, but I think I can't. You could go for other wood elf characters sitting on top. I mean, you can Darthu or one of the spirits that kick around.
I don't know. Darthu is like not very lifey. Like, he's a tree, but
you've got to remember that the lore of life is also the lore of lustiness as well. The lore of having children, the lore of moving, the lore of fertility.
Darthu's more like an angry motherfucker. Like, he's just wrathful.
So I think I would constantly move away from and constantly return to either Alariel or Ariel, not the composite. Thanks very much.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So really, that's kind of funny. The only wind I feel like I really disagree with Andy on is Shadow, which is fitting.
Yeah, I think that works nicely. I definitely think I'd stick with the Monkey King for that one, just because it brings in something that's vastly missing.
I do like that idea. I do like that idea a lot. I just I don't know. I have a hard time. If someone were to come to me, they'd be like, well, okay, but Malekith is going to have like the power of Assurin in him or whatever, because he totally embraces the Phoenix King. Then I would be willing to cede that point.
So I would add,
unless we got a special character gnome, like if the Queen of the Gnomes came out.
That'd be different, because they're clearly
gnomes are back.
But I'm also quite keen to move away from just looking at the West if we possibly can.
Yeah.
So as one last thing though, we were looking at that as my general incarnate wins. I'd also be looking for the deities, particularly the elven deities, for a variety of lore reasons to be made manifest through their mortal representation.
Well, the gods.
So I would be happy for Azurin to be working through Malekith. I would be happy for Isha to be working through Ariel. I'd be happy for Tal or your Kurnos working through Orion. And I think that being able to bring that to the table as an end times thing would really speak to why the elves were separated as so special by the old ones themselves. And there's definitely something in there that could be potentially used for here's our end of the world battle that fucking rocks.
Yeah, and one of the things that I really like about that selection of incarnates that I think is worth pointing out is it allows the gods to have room to be important, which the end times completely shit on, because it was just like, fuck the gods, they're not fish people.
Hey, Hendrik.
To be fair, they're very sneaky.
They're very sneaky.
So sneaky that nobody knows about them. But like, there's so many, and there are hints of it that happen. Like, they're not consistent with it. Like, the Greenskins getting an incarnate was so weird. It should have just been Gork and Mork.
It should be Gork and Mork.
Like the idea of Grimgor like growing even bigger in stature as the power of Gork is flooding through him and he's reaching his zenith, and then Skarsnik finally shows up and he's reached this. Like, I think Skarsnik should have won the whole fight for Carragate Peaks. Like, Skarsnik should have been the ultimate winner.
I agree.
He's in the
to lose.
Yeah, like
directly.
Yeah, and there are some parts that, like, once again, parts of the end times I like of that, like the Carragate Peaks storyline for the most part, I think was pretty good. Of like, Belagar was too stubborn to leave. Like, he just couldn't let go. His pride wouldn't let him. That's very well written.
That's perfect.
Like the Skaven being kind of this unstoppable tide that everyone's struggling to deal with. Yeah, sure, fine. I think it kind of underplayed how scary the Greenskins would have actually been, especially because Skarsnik was getting like everybody, and he also had like ogres joining him with like Goldfag Maneater and stuff. I think it underplayed how scary the Greenskins are, because that happened in Thanquol. So of course the Skaven were the main characters of the book, and they literally just won every fight like crazy.
So, loosely, if you're speaking to the story of the Greenskins, the story of the Greenskins is the story of the inevitability of their growing Wa as it spreads across the globe, and how it has been both stymied by variety of environmental issues on the Warhammer world that cuts the orcs down and stops them becoming proper 40k manifestations of the species, and also impositions upon them by, say, for example, the Chaos Dwarves creating the Black Orcs. What we're really looking for for is some sort of culmination point for this, when the Wa that builds up explodes into something new. And that's where really I think the prophecy stands out. They started with a decent plot line. The idea that there were going to that at least two of the greenskins, and arguably a representation of the little and the big Wa, or Mork and Gork, sneaky and stabby, or stabby and sneaky, or whatever you want to look at it, brutal and cunning, cunning and brutal, whichever way you're doing it, they should have had their own thing. They didn't need someone else's thing. The more energy that the orcs build, the greenskins build up, that is all they need. They don't need another wind to come in and somehow pierce their orky bubble. That shouldn't happen. They should be manifesting.
Yeah, that was definitely an AOS thing. Like that was just they wanted Gorka Morka, so. Yeah.
And they wanted Gorka Morka to manifest through that. And I think it was an absolute, I'm going to go as far as saying a betrayal of what the Greenskins offered. And all of the way their unique magic worked and their unique culture worked was basically overwritten by an external imposition in a way that I think didn't develop them further, make them more interesting. It made them in some respects less interesting and less unique.
Yeah, and it's such a shame because there were so many fucking cool things they could have done story-wise, of like the Council of Incarnates happens and then Skarsnik shows up because he's cunning but brutal, and he shows up and is like, "Oi, I'm here to treat with you gits," and they're like, "Who the fuck is this guy?" And like, of course he doesn't bring Grimgor because Grimgor can't be trusted to calm down, and he's like, "Hey, I convinced Grimgor that Archaon git says he's the best, so we're gonna go kick his ass. Y'all stay the fuck out of our way," and they just go run off and do greenskin things. Like, I think the final battle between Grimgor and Archaon is perfect.
Yeah,
like Archaon genuinely does not think the greenskins are worthy of his time, and that costs him big time, where he loses the Eye of Shirian. I think that's awesome. That's a really good moment for the greenskins.
I don't think that's just awesome. I think that it is an imperative, and shouldn't have been tied to, for example, Gur. Grimgor was already in a perfect narrative place to have everything that he needs and to properly surprise the Everchosen. If he is an incarnate of one of the winds of magic, he's an actual threat regardless. The idea that he doesn't have that and he is still a fucking threat, that's what the greenskins represent. They are always the one that come in that everyone goes, whatever, and they're the ones that come through like a tide. Remember what Grom the frickin' Paunch did? He did the impossible. He broke down magic of the elves that have been standing for thousands of years, and he did that because of the Wa energy that came with them that destroyed the illusions that stood over the shifting sands and allowed them to arrive over in Yvresse.
No, Artorias, I didn't think about that. It actually would have been really funny for Skarsnik to send Wurzag to talk to the incarnates, because Wurzag is the prophet who would. Because the whole thing with Wurzag, a lot of people in the end times, they even talk about it. They just don't keep talking about it. Yeah. I love that meme. I love and hate it, but I do love it. But yet, like, the whole thing of Wurzag is that Wurzag is the one drumming up support for the time has come. The prophets will be selected. There will be a fist of Gork and a hand of Mork. The time is nigh. And he's actually organizing the shamans to figure out who it is. And Wurzag is the one, it's established in the lore, Wurzag's the one who chooses Skarsnik and Grimgor. He looks at them and he goes, "It's these gits. I got to get them together." And then he just doesn't, and it's dumb. But anyway, but yeah, and the other thing that leaves open is that I really like is we didn't pick a human, because I think humanity getting an incarnate ruins, for me, it ruins what makes humanity special.
And yeah, I agree.
Which is that humanity rises to the occasion and has their gods. Like, granted, I think their gods would play a huge role. But like, the thing to me that's always been so special about like Sigmar wasn't some super crazy powerful magic wizard dude. He's just the guy that rose to the occasion of impossibility and somehow fucking won.
That's the story you want to tell with humanity in general. And there was lots of opportunities for doing that, which I think did not come to pass. And I agree that would have made for a better story for them again in general.
And I'll say, sure, Grimgor taking out the Eye of Shirian and stuff brings Archaon down a little bit. Like, I think the whole thing would have been Archaon loses a little, like, he wins a lot, but he loses a little piece of something every time he fights one of these big bads. And then you get that final battle where Archaon's grounded a little bit, and he finally faces off with Karl Franz, who's just a man with Galmaraz. And that would have been incredible.
And if we're destroying the world, the end of the world is him taking Galmaraz, because it's Warhammer.
Yeah.
It's Warhammer.
Yeah, there would
That's
have
it.
been an
It's
excellent
Warhammer.
tragedy there.
It should end in Warhammer. Ultimately, you want to have the core image of the entire game being part of the final fight. And the ultimate one is either Archeon is struck down, but it doesn't matter. But the end comes because the world is already lost. A classic Pyrrhic victory, which I think is perfect for Warhammer.
Yeah.
They fight to the very last man. Karl Franz dies, but he takes out Archeon. Archeon dies, killed by the Warhammer, and the Warhammer itself spins off into eternity or whatever. Or alternatively, if you really want to end the world, you have the realization that chaos is going to take it. So the Warhammer itself is somehow used to crack the world. Ultimately, you want the Warhammer to be central to whatever the final fight is. It has to be. This is Warhammer we're playing. We're not playing Archeon, the fantasy battles. We're playing Warhammer fantasy battles. So whatever that final fight is, it should be fucking epic. It should have that fucking Warhammer, and it should have some form of Pyrrhic victory, some way of showing that Chaos lost, but won. Some way of saying that all of humanity and all the other species, the mortal realms, didn't lose completely, because they're setting up the next step. And I think that so much of the core imagery of what Warhammer was got absolutely forgotten and lost behind everything they were trying to set up for their next game. And they forgot that they were telling, at heart, a story. And they were telling a story that was supposed to be interesting for all of us to read. So when we read through it, by the end of it, we went, fucking hell, that was amazing. Holy shitballs. That was the most Warhammer-y Warhammer thing that ever Warhammered, ever. I can't believe it's over. Oh my God. But it's never over, because we can always go back to our old books.
Yeah, and then they go, hey, we're starting the old world now.
Yeah, totally. So we're sad at the end, but we're also massively engaged because it was so cool. And that sets them up for 10 years later, building up the old world. That sets up their Age of Sigmar. But that isn't what happened. I'm also going to bring up Godzilla there. I apologize for taking the bit there. End times fight I would have wanted would have been Nakai and Gorok versus Throg and Tyrox. Yeah.
Just monsters versus monsters.
Part 2, yeah, totally. I mean, who doesn't want to have all the monsters kicking ass in monsters?
Yeah, well, and it would have been so much more interesting and poetic to have the final battle kind of be everybody versus chaos, because that's what it's supposed to be, and it's supposed to show how unstoppable chaos is that even versus everybody, they still win.
Yeah, like, it should have been the last. It should have been the last horrendous fight. There should have been one gigantic battle, the final battle, our moment where at the end of Avengers we have built up towards Thanos arriving and Thanos sort of winning but losing, because that's really what you want to occur, and that's what should have happened. But instead we got some sort of DCEU didn't quite manage to do it. Martha! It just wasn't what we wanted.
Yeah, the stupidest thing is they could have pulled off Age of Sigmar too, with the whole thing of like, they could have ended it that way, and then they just play it as like chaos, the gods in their insanity either A, want the game to continue, so they set things into motion to continue the game, or B, there is something they didn't expect. There's something about like there's something about Galmaraz and it flying off into space, and something about it, starts to wake up, and like Sigmar does return in a sense, but like he didn't need to return literally.
Yeah, I think really, if you're going to be setting up your new game, do you really want it to be the game of white dude with blue eyes and blonde hair? Is that the game you're really trying to start? It's not what would have, I think, made the best start for their next game anyway. But sure, that's what they went for. What would have made a better final battle, so to speak, would have been that gigantic conglomeration of chaos, the overwhelming tide, coming against those few last pillars of light, the last remaining vestiges of the mortal realms, going to their final fight, and you don't explain it. You fade to black.
Yeah.
Well, okay, the last heroes making their last stand. And why do you do that? It's because Warhammer, much like 40k, is eternal war. What they should have done is collapse it all down into effectively a Kalidor-esque style situation, where the last people are left fighting off against whatever it is that lies, the eternity of chaos, and them holding in the middle, that tiny little bubble. and that tiny little bubble then spans out to be something else. There's lots of ways you could end it, but that's one of them.
Gromardil comes up behind Malekith and chops his head off.
Yeah, quite. But what you really want is to have that concept of unity, that they are working together now against the enormity of what lies beyond. And potentially, if you really want to mess the story up, you have chaos fall upon itself.
Well,
so at the very last moment, when all hope is lost, it's literally nothing more than the fact that they persevered that potentially allows them to survive, because then chaos, incapable of being consistent, falls upon itself and everything is fighting everything at the end. There's lots of different shit you can do. That's just one example. But I fear that what they did go for was so bland, trite, and almost in places nonsensical. And that you looked at, for example, the giant Auric Bastion, which we didn't even talk about. I really wish we had, because I could have had a good rant about fucking
we can always you know what, we can just do that in the Gelt episode.
Yeah, totally, because fucking hell, that Auric Bastion, he built a giant bastion that was so tall you couldn't even fly over it, no matter what you were, because it was so big. What the fuck is this thing? How did he build it? Oh, he did it because he was the Supreme Patriarch and magic was a bit bigger now. Well, why didn't the previous Supreme Patriarch do this during the last invasion of Chaos?
What the
holy fuck sticks! A giant wall that's so big you can't fly over it sounds pretty handy. Oh,
everyone's sitting there like, what the fuck, Volans?
Oh.
Why didn't you do
that? Why didn't you do that, Volans, who could apparently channel all 8 winds of magic? Let's just leave it to Gelt, who can only channel 1, probably.
And once again, there are some cool parts. There are cool bits. Like one Andy was saying, like with the chaos turning against itself, there was like some cool moments that they didn't really do much with, but like were fun. Of like, Archaon's like, oh, the incarnates have come for me. I call upon the dark gods. Send me all your demons. Slaanesh, like, hilariously, literally sends his most inept demons, because Slaanesh doesn't want chaos to win. Slaanesh loves civilization. He loves progress. He loves people being comfortable, so that's how she's able to get in. And to Slaanesh, the end of everything sucks. That's a bad thing.
Slaanesh requires something that the other gods don't. And that Slaanesh requires a certain level of indolence and time, because you've got to have time to think, well, could I have something more? And if you're constantly fighting for survival, you never reach that point because you're too busy doing the next thing to live. It's why, for example, indolence is often associated very closely with upper classes who've got time on their hands. The time on the hands is suddenly they start experimenting with new things. It's why Slaanesh is so strongly related to many of the nobility across the Empire, for example. So, yeah, I can see that being a particular issue.
And it's like, the Dark Gods are insane, but like at the end of the day, they don't want to win. That's another thing the end times is a little funky about, is that like the Dark Gods are so unified, which granted, Archaon being Archaon, but it's like that would have been a cool thing, is if the second Archaon died, which granted they didn't kill him because they wanted him for Age of Sigmar, but he should have died, and the second he died, the Dark Gods should have just immediately torn into each other.
Yeah, totally. I'll also add, given that we had ourselves the need, apparently, for the Auric Bastion, there was just better ways to build giant walls along the edge of Kislev. For example, Atlantis sinks, Ulthuan goes down, enormous tidal waves come out, Ice Court comes out and freezes the fucking tidal wave. Now we've got a giant fucking wall that makes sense and also speaks to the individual nations. Mother Kislev and her folk get together and freeze that giant wave, which also creates an enormous wall that allows them to hold off the hordes from the north. There's all manner of really cool stories you can tell with that. And Henrik, thank you very much.
How about the old one saw what was coming and knew they would end, so this is terrible and happen. So okay, so I can't tell if that's a joke or not, but I do want to say this. Of that
Thanks, Henrik.
Age of Sigmar has genuinely done some fun things with the old ones, much in the more recent lore, in that it kind of plays with the idea that the old ones seeded a lot of planets, not just the Warhammer world, which is likely, and B, that a lot of their artifacts in the thing about Age of Sigmar that makes the end time so extra frustrating is that it relied very heavily initially upon its relationship to the end times, despite the fact, and like you get the feeling, oh, the end times has to happen the way it does for Age of Sigmar. No, it doesn't. Age of Sigmar happens literally millions, maybe billions of years after the end times.
It just doesn't matter.
And here's the thing, Age of Sigmar has an end times in it because the Age of Sigmar is a post-apocalyptic setting. A lot of people don't realize that. It has an Age of Chaos where chaos wins for 200 years before the Age of Sigmar starts. It is literally a post-apocalyptic setting. By definition, it is post-end times. It's just that chaos doesn't fully wipe everything out before the good guys start turning it around. Oh yeah, 500 years, sorry. But
just want to call out, I am Mustache Man.
Mustache Man. I like how we have labels for names and he's like, fuck that, he's Mustache Man. But
love it. Nice one, Raziel.
Yeah, 500 years. But like the end times, I accept the idea that like, sure, it needs to happen for like the world to end so that this other setting happens, but it does not need to directly correlate into what happens to AOS because A, magic, and B, it's a long time later.
Plus, it could have been done with everything anyway. I just want to pull up this comment because I think it's actually speaking to something we often forget about Warhammer. And I know it was a somewhat flippant aside, but I think that there is something to say here. Warhammer, at its heart, was often
Jack, can y'all still see and hear me?
I can see you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can I be heard? Can I be seen?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay.
You're good. You're good.
Okay.
You're good.
We good. Okay. So Warhammer was often, indeed, frequently about satirizing, particularly 40k, the real world, and we could have had a really lovely thing about this great wall that was protecting the Empire as well, being built by the Kislevites and their big ice magic. There could have been a really nice little subtle piece of interplay in there that was speaking to modern politics as well. And for all we often have people saying, keep politics out of our games. Fuck that. Yeah, Warhammer at its very heart is about satirizing and pricking at pillars of extraordinary power of that ilk. And it would have been something I'd been very keen to mess around with.
Fantasy's good at that.
Okay, so can I still be heard? Just double checking. I've got a big here.
Yes, no, yeah. Don't ignore him.
Okay, I'll ignore him. Swope, you're speaking nonsense.
You got one guide. Don't worry about it.
Good.
But yeah, so the end times.
We didn't even do the last books because we got so caught up in these ones.
Yeah, no,
we knew it was going to be a big topic. We discussed it beforehand, and we're like, "This is not going to work," but we're going to give it a damn good go. Hey, Rogan.
All right. So
yeah,
at this point, I'm going to go ahead and pivot to comments that people submitted.
Sounds good. We're going to have to go through these very quickly, though, so expect short answers.
Yeah, and a lot of these, we love you guys. A lot of these questions are obscenely broad. We're going to give you like. We're going to try and keep them very, very short. Kabanda. Oh, no, I'm not touching that. I'm going to get so angry. I've already had one rant this stream. I don't understand. They had Scarbrand and they're like, no, let's pull in a 40k character as the ultimate big bad for Khorne.
Because that makes sense.
Fucking Christ.
Love it.
Okay. So Scythe Petals, your first question about Lilith not being the lady of the lake. We talked about that a lot. I think we covered that. We talked about that and why I don't like that. We talked about the Bretonnian Civil War. We talked about, do I think Grail Knight Kruber makes sense even though it's a stretch in the end times? Yeah, it's fine. It's the end times. Shit happens. It's weird.
Shit happens. I mean, really, I think you'll find a lot of our answers concerning this are going to be, if something big and weird has happened, that's fine, as long as they justify it and give a cool story. Because it's going to be cool because the end of Warhammer.
Yeah. Do I think the Lady of the Lake would be desperate enough to call upon anyone remotely chivalrous and make them a Grail Knight? Yeah. Okay, sure. As long as they're Bretonnian, which he is technically by bloodline. And he's earned the Grail by that point. Like he's literally done.
Yeah, gotta also remember as well that
and
I don't think it is necessarily as much as a stretch as many would like it to believe, because it is something that is bestowed by, let's be blunt, elves.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you want to get past all of the mystical of it all, the elves just choose people that they think will further their goals. And that, I know, is a bit of a blunt, weird way of looking at it, but ultimately that does mean that you can have some pretty weird characters when you state that out clearly for the end times. Hey, Hammond. Andy from 1 to Haggis, how accurate is Shrek's? Oh, fuck off. Shrek's accent is indeed somewhat of a standing meme around here. It's not good. But the worst part of it is that it's close to good.
That makes it way worse, doesn't it?
So if anything, it makes it worse because you're like, oh, it's grating, it's close, but oh shit. Yeah.
What would we have done with Gilles and Aberash's team up army? What would they have done to try and save the world? Epic last second charge to help at the big final battle, I guess.
Yeah, they'd have come to the final battle, and I think that's one thing that was particularly missing for me, and that was a very clear final battle. It should have been there. A massive one.
The final battle of Midnight was weird.
It was just not good.
Chaos was super overwhelming. There was no need to further nerf the good guys by like making them randomly appear in the city. It was very odd.
The final battle was mince. It needed to be a better, big, massive one that pretty much encapsulated everything that was Warhammer. And everybody should have been there. Everybody. They should have had gods walking the earth. They should have had massive dragons. They should have had dragon ogres the size of fucking mountains. They should have had. It should have made the last battle in good old Marvel's cinematic nonsense look like pipsqueak nonsense in return. It should have been huge.
Yeah. How do new Fey Enchantresses come about? Since Morgiana died, shouldn't there have been a new one? Yeah.
Or shouldn't she have just returned?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. wish we knew why she didn't.
Yeah. Depending upon which version of Morgiana Le Fay you go with, she should have just come back, or alternatively, she was an elf in the first place.
Yeah. Like you figured the lady would have picked a new one at the very minimum, but yeah, no. But hey, Bretonia didn't matter. That's why.
Yeah, but ultimately, yes, I think that's the correct reason. They'd moved past those story beats. Bretonia was now in the past.
Do I think characters returning in Age of Sigmar from Last Stands like Kugoth and Festus was good or bad? I think that Kugoth never coming back in Age of Sigmar is a little weird, but it does make Lewin's last battle with him a lot more important and epic that he like somehow perma-killed him, which like, hey, cool, awesome. Festus coming back is really weird because he doesn't do anything in Age of Sigmar. Like he's there, but he doesn't really do a lot. And he didn't manage to ascend before he died, so he should have just stayed dead. I have no idea why they brought him back.
I mean, in some respects, it feels just like Age of Sigmar is going, oh shit, let's just keep on pulling on the nostalgia that comes before.
He has a many. That's why they brought him back. Yeah, totally. Narratively, he should not have come back.
And it's that right guy says we all do a part 2 to cover topics of the end times. Y'all didn't get a chance to. Love these talks with y'all. Keep it up.
Maybe
I think the answer to that is probably yes, but we'll probably have a stricter focus because this one, as we've noted, is somewhat sprawling.
Yeah, it'll only be about books 4 and 5 since we didn't get to them.
Yeah, quite.
Any other Bretonia thoughts, ideas we would have liked? We already covered that. Do we think Arcan was handled? How do we think Arcan was handled in the end times?
I'd like to add one question about the Bretonians. I really wish that they'd learned the nature of how the Wood Elves were manipulating them, and they'd used that as a part of showing how the order fell apart, as they just did not like it.
They do that in book 5. Like,
I mean, do they?
Technically, I mean, Jared finds out, and then him and all the Bretonians leave. They don't participate in the Siege of Bentheim because they leave.
Yeah, but like, it's not a massive conflict. It's just it's another thing that happens off screen.
Yeah, it's not as big as it should have been. I agree.
Yeah, and it would be nice, and that should be part of the build-up because you don't want the final battle to not have people. That's when all of the mistakes of the past are forgotten and they are brought together. It shouldn't have happened at the final battle. It should have happened like book 2. Bretonia leaves, and everyone's left going fuck, and then come the final one, in comes that giant lance of Bretonians in the final battle. That would have been fucking cool.
Yeah. But yeah, how do we feel Arcan was handled? I thought he was all right. Like he's not like he's fairly consistent to his thing of like he thinks he's going to be killing the gods. Unfortunately for him, it doesn't work that way. But like, and he's much more powerful than his previous iterations. But Warhammer's also had a lot of power creep over the years, so that was fine.
Yeah, I have no issues either. I think Archaon was handled well. I think that all the stories around it weren't. But I think Archaon fulfilled the role he should have fulfilled.
Yeah. How do we think Chaos in general was handled? It's whatever, it's fine.
I think there should have been more division come the end. There should have been more division. The closer they got to victory, the closer they got to victory, the closer that someone else should have tried to claim that victory. So the closer, like Khorne should have started beating down the others so that they could claim it was theirs or whatever. The closer they got to reaching the point where they didn't need to ally anymore, the more they shouldn't have allied. And that would have been a lovely way to show the dissolution of chaos.
Yeah, they also did this weird thing where like each god went a little bit into ascension and then got his ass kicked, so he was no longer powerful until like the end, and it was really weird. And they kind of had like Khorne as the final big bad. That was very unnecessary and
nope.
They would not, the gods would not have played like that. How do we think the dwarves were handled? I think the dwarves were handled
fine,
okay, up until the Council of Incarnates. Then they were absolute horseshit and they were garbage. Like the defending of the holds and like the whole epic battles and a lot of the thankful stuff, that was all fine. Even though I do think the Skaven very suddenly started obliterating the dwarf holds with kind of not a lot of great explanation. Like, it doesn't make sense how there's more magic and yet the dwarves got weaker. Like their runes should have gotten stronger and a lot of the old protection should have reactivated, but they didn't, and it was weird.
I think the biggest issue with the dwarves, they didn't have enough written about them to explain what the fuck was going on. And I found for the dwarves, they were broadly handled well, but that's because they're such a strong stereotype. And that it's really easy to just go, oh, they acted in a stereotypical way. Ha, ha, ha. They're almost a joke in terms of how they're written. And that meant that a lot of how they were written came across somewhat as the joke in the end. And they were fine. It would be nice to have a little bit more nuance in there and a bit of a greater understanding of how the characters are different beyond just, he's too stubborn to do the job. He's too stubborn not to see this job through. That's it.
Yeah, I will say though, the dwarves not getting any of their actual special characters for the entire last book is horseshit. I hated it.
It's bullshit. It's just bullshit. The dwarves should have been there. The dwarves of all should have been there in a fucking big, massive animal.
Yeah, the fact that they like created a new character who's just a random rune lord from Zufbar, I think, is very strange. Why didn't Elithanar have a vengeance off with Grombrindal against Malekith? Malekith got off super easy considering that Elithanar tries to kill him and then when he fails, he just gives up.
If you want to know what I think about what should have happened with Malekith and Grombrindal, go watch the Malekith stream because we go into some depth there, and I think that would have been a far better conclusion.
Yeah, the way they writ how Elithanar and Grombrindal settled their debt with Malekith was terrible. It was written very poorly.
I actually hate it.
What would we do differently? I think we talked a lot about that. Question for Andy: how do you think Balthazar Gelt was handled during the end times, and why do you hate him so much?
Wonderfully.
I will say, personally, I do.
I mean, he's proper shit on. In fact, I actually really enjoy many of the character developments and the spiral that Gelt gets himself into. The stupid shit that he does, though, and the massive overpower that he gets is a bit weird. But I think that Gelt has got quite a few really nice story beats through the course of the end.
I very much enjoyed Gelt's fall to necromancy and then his later redemption. It's a fun story.
It's a fun story, and I think that's something that added some depth. Do I think that they could have better handled other aspects of it? Oh, hell yes. But I do like aspects of it.
Random question. What do you think of Gregor Martark, the Supreme Patriarch of Beasts that takes over?
Literally nothing.
Yeah.
It does almost nothing for me. When I was
I love that Thyrus Gorman does not exist in the end times.
I was bewildered. They've got a character that's been established.
He's still around, guys. Why is he not?
Not only established since 1990 something or another, and very well ingrained into the setting, but popped up in multiple places, like the War Game, for example. Not the War Game, pardon me, online roleplay game, where they even had a really nice piece of art. The first place that Finnubar, for example, got a proper piece of art for himself.
Oh yeah, Warhammer Online.
Warhammer Online. And then just ditching it.
Why is he? Yeah. Anyway, if Warhammer the Old World were to progress into this point in the timeline, that's a huge if. I think they would go with a new Storm of Chaos or a new? They would never redo the Storm of Chaos. Listen, a lot of folks think the Storm of Chaos is fun. It has some cute moments, but it was a massive failure. Like Games Workshop wanted to tell a story, and they let the community be a part of it, and it fucked up their story, and they were too embarrassed to do anything. So it was a mess. The Storm of Chaos was not good.
Chaos was not ideal. It made a lot of mistakes, and the story writing to try and resolve those mistakes was not always the best.
Yeah,
Let's
like
be kind.
I understand a lot of people like it because Chaos loses, but it's an end times, but Chaos loses, but it's a very weird campaign.
I mean, was it any surprise that they were going to lose? Take all the armies of Warhammer, and how many of them do you think are being played by just Chaos alone? I mean, they were massively outnumbered just with the player base.
Yeah, plus the Storm of Chaos, it's literally just the fucking Asvar Cool, like all over again. Just with like more people involved. It like just tell a different story. You know what? If you want to do that, something like that, go talk about one of the other like 10 Everchosens. Go do their story.
That would have been fun. It would have been really nice to try and do a different Everchosen and show how that.
Games Workshop shot themselves in the foot trying to go forward. They should have gone backwards with the story because there's plenty they haven't filled out. But I would love for them to do a Horus Heresy with the End Times, where they take their time over many, many years to tell a good story.
Yeah. There's a fine story to tell in there, and all of the nonsense that the End Times books may offer have got kernels of great story all the way through it.
What happened to Leia? They got eaten by the Skaven very quickly,
which is mental.
Yeah, I know the land of mercenaries that has like some of the most well-funded armies in the world died instantly.
Yeah, pretty much wiped out in a few pages.
The Skaven existed and would have been ready for it.
Yeah,
no, they died.
No, yeah, mental.
Let's see. What happened to Mathlan? He reveals himself on a Black Ark after he gets captured, and he's like, "Fuck you guys!" Calls a tsunami, and he dies. He like functionally kind of kills himself. It's weird.
Really odd ending.
Okay. This is so. Do we consider extra material by another author to be canon or not? So, okay, what they're asking about is one of the authors. I think it was Josh Reynolds. Had his own like private website, like a blog site, where he allowed a lot of people to ask him questions about the end times, and he said, "This is what I would have done." And because the internet is the internet, and it happened at the time that it did, a lot of these questions through kind of pop culture have become people think they're canon, and so accept them as canon.
So, the canon of work that Games Workshop produces does not include anything that Games Workshop did not commission. So it is anything that they have printed. If you use the word correctly, it's the canon of work. That's everything that they have produced. So if it's sitting on a website or a blog, it doesn't count. That informs your interpretations and perhaps informs your views as to what the overall material represents, but it is not from Games Workshop. It is not canon. I would make it also relatively clear that every computer game, every small aside that comes from various licenses, including the current roleplay game, has not directly come from Games Workshop, so is not explicitly part of the canon of Games Workshop's Warhammer work, which is deeply amusing. If it was printed by Games Workshop, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd Edition, for example, or Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 1st Edition, that is a part of Games Workshop's canon of Warhammer work.
Yeah, but in answer to your question, Games Workshop also has the official stance that whatever you want to be canon is canon. So, you know,
yeah, pretty much. It's your game, do what you want with it.
They don't want to curate it, so
no, it takes people like us to whine about it for hours.
Yeah. Andy, since you wrote Realm of the Ice Queen, how would you have handled Kislev for the end times? Obviously, it'd have to end in a victory for Archaon, but what would be an end so bright eternity will remember us moment?
Okay, so for example, I would have tied it through to the Ambassador Chronicles, where they had the big gold teeth of Urson being such a central component towards defeating the Chaos Hordes that are coming in during the second book of that. I would have had the sinking of Ulthuan be building a big, huge, giant wall of ice, which the Teeth of Urson would have been responsible for holding back in place. We would have had probably a big, massive fight to represent the fall of Kislev and the fall of Prague in the past. You would want those to fall because symbolically they're interesting for Warhammer, and the previous editions of the game focus so much on those, and it shows how this fight is more important than the next fight, in that the current fight, in that Kislev has to fall, which means that the Kislevites then need to withdraw into the Empire and draw in as part of their force, and we have ourselves some massive conflicts between the Colleges of Magic and the Ice Witches and exactly where they sit. There have been some fun interplays with all of that, and I wouldn't have had them be the big fall. I'd have had them be a constant fallback until the final fight. But I would have definitely had the Ice Witches, the Hags, do some shit that stymied and held back chaos, allowing people to do some shit later. So our Conclave of Light, our various incarnates, whatever we do, that can come to pass because Kislev held them back for that extra month, that extra year, or whatever it takes for the campaigning seasons. But I most certainly would have had that. I would also, as one last point, almost certainly have had, because I've always liked the idea, the bringing about of Evernacht, which is a concept for the cult of Ulrich, where they believed that the entire world would fall into winter and that the cult of Ulrich would rise. And I would have had something that caused effectively a nuclear winter of some site.
Well, to be fair, the Skaven did blow up the moon, so that would do it.
Yeah, but again, something that causes the entire planet to be covered in hell and for everything to freeze up. And that would bring about a time of the ice witch, which I think would have been super fun and exciting.
Yeah, I would have milked the shit out of Cat. Okay, I'm not going to say that. I would have used Katerin as a character a lot. Yes.
Oh yeah, because she's such a fascinating one. But Evernacht is, as a concept, super fun, particularly because it freezes the gates, massively freezes them, and it gives you just that little bit of extra more time. And then the forces of chaos marching through the ice and eventually melting it, warping everything, the ice becoming something else. There's some great stories, ambushes, fire incarnate, doing something crazy up there. You could have had a really fun thing there. Plus, of course, the Lizardmen could have been involved.
Oh yeah. Yeti, we already talked about what we would have done probably in the east of like probably Li Dao going a little crazy, but you probably would have had like, chaos would have been invading over there too. Something would have happened to like burst open the Great Bastion, and the Celestial Dragon Emperor would have pulled off whatever the fuck his plan is, which probably would have failed. Or maybe succeeded.
No, I think I should have succeeded. His ultimate plan would probably be flee the world.
Yeah, pull a Lizardman.
Yeah, pull a Lizardman. And I think that would have been a lovely way to set up the Cathaeans as a faction for Age of Sigmar. When you find out that he has been manipulating Grand Cathay for the entire length of time for one purpose only, to get away. That would have been the ultimate betrayal and super fun too.
Yeah, plus I wouldn't have put it past him to abandon his children. Wouldn't it be awesome if all of Teleus Dolly and the Human Pirates did a last stand against Skaven and Sartos? Oh yeah, that could have been a lot of fun.
Yeah, totally could have. And the war at sea aspect was completely lost.
What happened to the Famir during the end times? Do you think they're in the Mortal Realms? They did not get brought up because Games Workshop completely ignored all of their supplementary material from Forge World and everything because they were in a rush to end things, so they didn't worry about it. And do I think they're in the Mortal Realms? Probably. They were there for a while. They were, funny enough, they actually lost their Chaos alignment and they got relabeled as a Destruction race. So they were no longer Chaos aligned in Age of Sigmar. Since then, they've kind of vanished. They might come back at some point. We have no idea. They're quite popular thanks to the Total War game now, but I don't know. And they've been growing more popular with time. Like they've reappeared in the roleplay game, and like there's a whole thing now with Muna Mim. Like they have a big special character now, and they have a much more interesting story. So we'll see where it goes. Do you think? Would you keep Nagash important to the end times? Yeah, you have to have Nagash. You have to have Nagash.
Nagash is a core Warhammer character. I wouldn't have done what they did with the Unknown. I wouldn't have handled Drachenfels the way they handled it, but because it just made Drachenfels a supernumerary character, which made no sense. But yes, definite for Nagash.
Yeah. Like Drachenfels probably should have had more of like kind of a fun cameo as opposed to being a weirdly major character who they can't say his name.
It was handled super weird, and they also made him super rubbish in comparison to the way the character had been built and developed.
Yeah, he was nothing like actual Drachenfels. Like
literal nothing like that.
He's a bodiless entity that can possess bodies, and is implied he can use necromancy, but he doesn't need to because
he's not Drachenfels. He's just some spirit they made.
Yeah, he's weird. Cetra kills everyone. Yay, nay. Well, definitely nay. I probably would have had Cetra go down the same way. Like I would probably not have changed the Cetra. I just wouldn't have brought him back. I would have
brought him back. I don't think that was handled badly. I think that was handled well.
Yeah, I would have had Nagash kill Cetra at the end. Like I think that is the appropriate story for him. Because the idea is that he had the option to let go of his pride and fight a greater evil, and he said, "No, fuck that, fuck you," and that's perfect to Cetra.
Perfect. Agreed.
Okay, we're gonna skip that one because that's too big a question. Will there ever be an update for the end times involving other races? I think there will be eventually. Age of Sigmar kind of does that from time to time. They like to touch on things that didn't happen in the end times or retcon things to make them genuinely better most of the time. Most of the time when Age of Sigmar touches on the end times, it improves it because someone actually is thinking about it and taking their time with it. So anyway. Do you think we'll see a more in-depth exploration of? Oh, we already answered that. What? Oh God, this question makes me angry. What would Morgar the Shadowgave have done the end times? He should have been really fucking important, is what he should have done. Like, he is literally one of the scariest, most powerful entities in the world. He is a god of mutation that has somehow managed to get a physical form into the universe. He's insane. He should have destroyed Athel Loren, or at least had a really big final battle there. The fact that he doesn't show up at all fucking infuriates me.
Yeah, it's just a wasted opportunity, really. A character that it suggests to me they just didn't really remember or know about.
If you go back, a lot of people don't realize in 6th edition, Morgar is the big bad for the Beastmen. Mm-hmm. In 7th edition, I don't know why they kind of like put him in the back a little bit, but in 6th edition, he is literally the main character. Kazrak is not nearly as big as Morgar is.
Kazrak's just a Beastman in the Dark Cloud.
Yeah, like a lot of people see Kazrak as the big bad. He's not. Kazrak is literally the most minor Beastman character.
Yeah, he's not the biggest character in the known world. He's just a successful local warlord.
The most powerful Beastmen in existence are Malagor the Dark Omen and Morgar. And Morgar is literally a god. Like, he is on par with Ariel and Orion. He is insane. It takes armies to stop him. What are our thoughts on how Gotrek and Felix was handled in the end times? That's complicated.
That's a complicated one.
We'll do a Gotrek and Felix episode one day.
That's potentially a whole stream.
Sotek said, wait, what? Oh God. Okay, so I'm going to break this question down okay, so this question basically boils down to how do we feel about all the prophecies that were not fulfilled? So, like, for instance, in the Liber Chaotica, there's a prophecy that said that when the world ends, Khorne would go around killing 8 animals, and at each one, different things would happen. Can we elaborate on those prophecies and other prophecies related to the end times? The answer is none of them played a role because Games Workshop didn't care about them. Like, Kraken Rock doesn't wake up and reappear. Well, Age of Sigmar says he does because Age of Sigmar actually cares. But Warhammer Fantasy doesn't bring back Kraken Rock. It doesn't bring the prophecy of Malekith being killed by a male sorcerer. It doesn't bring the prophecy of Khorne killing the 8 beasts, and each beast that he kills is kind of equivalent to like one of the trumpets being blown in Armageddon, where like an effect happens. They ignore all that shit because they didn't have time and they were rushed.
Yeah, I think a mixture of ignorance and a lack of care played a large part of that, and it's a shame.
When Durthu gains the power of the ancients, and gives the merged power to Ariel / Alariel, and she's also the incarnate of life, how far is she from power level of pre-cataclysm Aisha? Honestly, when Durthu takes all the combined power of Athel Loren, all the combined spirits, and he injects that into the combined of all of Aisha, who is also now the incarnate of life, I'd say the lore doesn't do it right, but I would say she'd probably be a lot stronger, to be frank. That's an obscene level of power.
Yeah, it's not small. And the biggest issue in trying to answer a question like that is that the established lore really deals badly with what the gods are and are not, right up to the end times where certain gods are deemed to be exceedingly important and others are merely forgotten and waysided, even though they are potentially more useful for the outcome. So the answer to that is we don't really know. And it could be less, it could be more.
Yeah, she would certainly have much more impact on the physical world probably than Aisha
ever. Oh, hell yes.
What do we think? Okay, we'll skip that. We already talked about Aberration. It was a huge letdown because they should have done more with him. Like, dude's really important. They just ignored his ass.
Yep. Totally.
How stupid was the fact that they let Vlad die in Altdorf? So okay, the death where Vlad dies because he tries to drink the blood of one of the Glotkin and it infects him with the disease is kind of hilarious. To be fair, that happens differently in the big book. In the novel, I think he bites and like drinks the blood of one of the Nurgle guys. Vlad would not have done that. Vlad would never have done that. He's not that stupid.
It struck me as some dumb shit.
Now,
I mean, it's really, seriously, he's not an idiot.
I could be mistaken, but I believe in the big book, he doesn't drink his blood, but he stabs him with his sword, which as a magical property absorbs blood and feeds that essence to Vlad. And that's how he gets infected, which is a little more reasonable because it was unexpected. Because like he stabs a lot of Nurgle guys and never hurts them. but the Glocken is just that level of disease. But it's still weird.
It's kind of weak.
Yeah,
I mean,
Vlad's very smart. He wouldn't have done that.
Yeah, I mean it's just weak. The problem with powers like that is they tend to run at the speed of plot. You can fight Nurgle all day and never die as a hero as long as you've got a name until the day you decide that today's the day you'll die, and suddenly, because of whatever reason they conjure, you catch something and die. It's just weak. It's not a good way to kill your characters because it invalidates all their previous choices, which were sensible and lead up to that point where suddenly it's insensible and doesn't make sense. So I personally don't like it.
Yeah, I see people ask about End in the End Times. We actually learned that End is wiped out by I believe Dakala the Denied teams up with Arbal the Undefeated, and they wipe out End, supposedly.
Which one was that one in?
It is it's literally a single offhand mention in one of the novels. It's when Archaon's talking to all of his generals who he has summoned to Middenheim. It's very, very brief.
Yeah. But I haven't read that for like 10 years, so no wonder I didn't remember
it. Let's see. But yeah, I do agree. I actually like the way Vlad ultimately dies, trying to save Isabella. That to me
the only way he's allowed to die.
Yeah, that was a fitting death for him. Now, the fact that he saved Isabella and that literally didn't go anywhere was weird. Because Isabella basically comes back like a newborn babe for some reason. In my opinion, she should have come back and been fucking furious, and let her just go crazy and be awesome until she dies. Who was the most powerful incarnate in the End Times and why? In the canon version, Nagash is by far the strongest. Like it goes out of its way to say Nagash is like the Council of Incarnates, like the 6 of them that are together. Nagash is implied to be as strong as all 6 of them until Sigmar gets his hammer. When Sigmar gets the hammer, debatably he becomes the strongest because Sigmar. But Nagash is the strongest. What happened to Drycha? Long story short, Drycha goes fucking crazy and betrays the Wood Elves and thinks that if she kills all the elves, Athalorn will go back to the way it used to be because she's insane, which, like, all right, fine. She teams up with Be'lakor to purify the Forest of Elves, and then in the midst of the fighting, I don't remember exactly what happens, but something happens where her insanity goes away for just a moment because she's kicking the shit out of Malekith, which she honestly shouldn't have been. I mean, Drycha is strong, but at this point, he's the incarnate of shadows. He should have easily won that fight.
Easily.
But Drycha is whooping his ass. And she gets cured of her madness for a second. And that second, Malekith chops her head off. Because he's like, holy shit. And kills her. Which, like, all right, waste of a character.
Sure.
Like I'm honestly fine with Drycha betraying the Wood Elves. I think working with Be'lakor was a little too far.
Yeah, the betrayal aspect is a core component of chaos taking over the world, and I'm fine with all of that. It's when you start working directly with chaos without having an established step-by-step process that's taken you there that it just doesn't make sense. Working directly with Be'lakor without any real justification, bullshit.
Yeah, like Drycha, like what they should have done is like Drycha being the one responsible for assassinating or at least wounding her enough that she has to fuse with Ariel. That would have been the way to do Drycha. Is her trying to take down Ariel. Blah, blah, blah. At what moment did we realize the End Time had junked the shark and wasn't gonna nail the landing? Ooh, that's a toughie. For me, it was. Oh, fuck, man.
Right. So I'm going through the Nagash book because it was book 1 for me. I'm just not sure where it jumped the shark. Jump the shark is a very specific moment.
I know what it is for me. For me, the moment when the End Times hit the point where I was so furious that they did what they did that I was like, I hate everything about this was actually in book 5.
Wow, much later than me.
Well, yeah, well, it wasn't good writing, and I hated a lot what they were doing, but then they did something that fucked everything they had just written, which is that Teclis resurrects Tyrion using the Oak of Ages and puts the Wind of Light into him to basically replace, I guess, the Curse of Cain and Ulrich's flame. So Tyrion or Teclis massacred billions of people to resurrect his brother as the incarnate of light. And I said, what the fuck? Because it completely ruined the entire point of the Cain book. The whole point of Cain is that Tyrion finally loses himself to the Curse of Cain, which, like, fine, that makes sense for his character. And he dies, and Cain dies with him. the second you bring Tyrion back, you completely fucked up that entire storyline. I don't care. I don't care that he's like, oh, I'm gonna fill him with all this new stuff. Bullshit. The second he came back, you brought Cain back, as far as I'm concerned. That ruined the entire point of the Cain storyline, which I didn't like already, but at least it was a storyline, and that instantly fucked that entire story. Horrible decision.
I can only agree, but really almost all of that book for me was one gigantic shark that they were trying to jump over. It's basically Jaws made manifest, and you're a tiny little ant attempting to jump over it. I think actually for me, it's something we discussed earlier in the stream, and it's before the storm of chaos. It's before the end times even becomes a thing, and we're looking at what Gelt does to hold back Sylvania. And you just look at it and you realize that they have no idea about the character that they're discussing. They have no idea about the capacity of the Supreme Patriarch, about how the winds of magic work, about what would be required to build something that could hold back something which clearly Manfred at this point is ascendant, and what it would require to hold all of that
all
back,
the way down.
and how much faith is involved with this. And they conflated faith with magic, which with humans is not really the case. It's a much deeper, more convoluted affair than that. But they just walked over that like it was nothing and said, we'll just wrap it up with a spell and turn it into one gigantic shield of faith, which has been built by a wizard. It basically undermined what had been the core message of Warhammer Faith for almost 30 years, the division between magic and faith. And it didn't address it. It walked over it. And I went, fuck that. Stupid idea. And when it became quite clear that that was nothing more than the first step towards the greater overall end, I had already reached a point where I was like, I don't think they know what they're doing.
Yeah, and there are so many moments I could point to. That's the one that jumps to my mind is the most egregious, because it literally is the end time stabbing itself in the back. But like there were a lot of small moments that made me genuinely very upset. That I'm not going to bother with right now. You can catch me on.
We'll just get upset again.
You can come to one of my Twitch streams when I'm playing Total War Warhammer and ask me about it. I will be happy to bitch about it, but we don't have time right here, right now. When the Black Pyramid was raised from the ground, it became a floating citadel / base. Was that only possible due to the vortex being unbound, kind of like how the dwarf goal? Yeah, functionally, you could argue that it's just if you have enough magic, you can do anything. Yeah,
totally. Warhammer has always enjoyed its big, huge, floaty things, whether it was all the way back in 3rd edition with its flying ships that were just floating their way.
We got a lot of flying pyramids in the end times. It was a theme.
And we know that they love their Necrons, and replacing the Warhammer imagery with 40k imagery. We got a flying pyramid that came straight out of a movie was an almost expected outcome. I don't think it was tied necessarily to the Winds of Magic collapsing or the vortex, collapsing. It's just a thing what they were gonna do.
Yeah. That being said, I totally forgive the flying Black Pyramid of Nagash because the artwork for it was so fucking beautiful, and in Total War Warhammer, it's a kick-ass map, so I'm totally fine with it.
I'm totally cool with it as well. I have a lot of criticisms that I think this stream may have made clear, but flying pyramid, black or no,
it's like
one of them.
It's all right.
It's the end time. Shit happens.
What happened to the green and pink tide led by Grimgor? Okay. So the answer to this is going to make you laugh because of how stupid it is. So Grimgor's leading an unstoppable army, right? It kills everything in the Mountains of Morn, wipes out the Chaos Dwarves, wipes out Grand Cathay. He's unstoppable. He's literally unstoppable. Chaos should not be a big deal for him. The problem, apparently, so stupid. So when Teclis performs the ritual by killing Lilith to teleport everybody to Middenheim, part of the ritual grabs Grimgor, right, and teleports him too, even though he's way off in the east because he's an incarnate. So he's got to show up. This is actually where Grimgor enters the story, by the way. We do not see Grimgor at all, ever.
Although he is happily destroying 3/4 of the Warhammer world in the background.
Even though
Chaos, it was the greenskins.
Yeah, Grimgor getting the incarnate of beasts, like him becoming the incarnate of beasts, getting the wind, happens off screen. It's only mentioned. It's not mentioned in the big book. You have to read the small novel to even find out how he does that. Which is where he kills Grease's Goldtooth and stuff. None of that, and him wiping out the Chaos Dwarves. Also, not mentioned in the big book, only mentioned in the small book. So Grimgor literally comes out of nowhere And because the way the spell works, instead of, teleporting everybody because it's got a god fueling it, it literally just teleports Grimgor and a very teeny tiny part of his wall. So he's cut off from his entire army. So that's why he is not that big. Yeah, there you go. Anything on the Great Green Prophet? Wurzag shows up in the end times. He tries to get Skarsnik and Grimgor to be his guys. He only makes it to Grimgor. He helps Grimgor at the Siege of Zarnagrund. He also appears in the Siege of Middenheim, where he uses a big spell to kill a bunch of people, and then we never see what happens to him. So
just disappears. So yeah. Fuck knows.
What non-apocalypse prophecies were on? We don't have time for that. There's a lot of prophecies.
Lots of them.
Warhammer's full of prophecies.
Yeah.
What were aspects of the end times we thought were well done? I thought
we've covered a lot of those.
Yeah, we've covered a lot.
Yeah,
I enjoyed elements of the fights in Lustria. I enjoyed a lot of the individual character moments. I hated the overall narrative. The idea that the Skaven pulled off a spell like 169 Grey Seers, granted, with the help of a Vermin Lord. The Vermin Lords were bullshit overpowered in the end times. And I know it's because they had new minis and they wanted to sell the minis. But like their power level is fucking bullshit in the end time.
I'm not too bothered about that. I quite like the idea of the Vermin Lords being proper bullshit when magic has gone mad.
One Vermin Lord teaches the Grey Seers a spell so strong that for the Slaanesh to dispel it, it knocks them all out.
Yeah, that's bullshit. That's bullshit. No, that's bullshit.
Yeah, retract your statement, Andy.
Yeah, that's bullshit. Yeah, that's kind of bullshit. But that's less the Vermin Lord doing it and more the spell that they decided that the Skaven could do.
Yeah, or like Vermilanx the Corruptor has a spell of plague so powerful that he literally just melts the entire jungle of Lustria. Like,
yeah, I'm cool with that.
All right, all right, whatever, sure.
Proper stupid, but I'm cool with that.
Let's see. Who do I think had the most plot armor in the end times?
Karl Franz?
Well, I mean, he dies technically.
Yeah, but right at the end. Teclis?
Teclis had a lot of plot armor.
Teclis had a lot of fucking
plot armor. He's Teclis, but
yeah.
Teclis is also like super weak and frail and fragile, and they like to forget that.
They forget that Teclis is only about 250 years old, which for an elf ain't old.
You know who had a weird amount of plot armor was Ikit Claw. Like
Ikit Claw has always got plot armor.
He almost died. He should have died twice, and he gets away both times, which is crazy.
I kind of like the idea that Skaven, slip away at the last moment. It seems appropriate for them. The
genuinely funniest option is you know what? I would actually say Neferata or Archon the Black.
Well, I hadn't considered Neferata.
Yeah, those two they live so long that they become useless to the plot. Like Neferata literally survives, and then she gets put in charge of watching over Sylvania, and she does literally nothing for the rest of the story.
Hangs around doing fuck all. I'd actually forgotten about her.
She should have died in Lamia. Like that should have been the end of Neferata's story.
Yeah.
Like Kalita should have killed her, or they should have killed each other, but Neferata should not have walked out of Lamia.
Yeah, that's a good call. I like that one. I wouldn't have considered that.
For Andy, could Geld have done something in the end times to make you like him?
Yes.
Oh, you're just gonna leave it there?
Yes.
Yeah, you're such a dick. All right. If the incarnates were okay, we don't have time for that. That's a cool question. We'll have to hit that on a part 2 sometime. I'm sorry. That's an interesting question. Should a Sky Titan have returned in the end times? I say yes. Yeah, yes. There is a castle in the sky that has the last Sky Titan, and he should have made an appearance. That would have been absolutely awesome.
There's no point in setting up a mystery in the Warhammer world that you don't deploy at the end times, because why set it up in the first place? Every single last fucking mystery should have been loosely either demystified or moved to Age of Sigmar.
Yeah, the last Sky Titan appearing would have been fucking kick-ass. That would have been
it would have been awesome. That would have been a final battle that would have been fucking cool.
Yeah, because literally a giant that is like a creature that is so big that it is a giant to other giants showing up. That would have been fun. Like, especially the whole thing of like, oh, Cracker Rock's here. How do we stop him? And this fucking Sky Titan shows up and he's like, I got this. And you get this fight of colossals in the background. Awesome.
Yeah, what's the point of having it if you don't use it? So yes.
Yeah, and then the last question, would Archaon not have been bitch slapped to the side if it was Nagash and not Sigmar who faced him down? I honestly don't know what you're. Oh, okay. I guess what you're saying is would Archaon not have just lost like he does against Sigmar? The thing is that's kind of destiny manifest. Like Archaon has to fight Sigmar and he has to lose. Like that's kind of his thing. Is because the important thing about Archaon you have to understand is that Archaon being the big bad who it kind of focuses on at the very end, his whole thing is he's an ex-Sigmarite that believes Sigmar is not real. He believes that Sigmar is a lie and that everything about him is false. And the whole point is that Sigmar is real, is what the narrative kind of reveals. And that he has, now granted, I think they should have done it through Karl Franz's faith rather than, like, it should have been a faithful man faces him down at the end. And it maybe should have been that Archaon, the thing that Archaon should have realized is that it shouldn't have mattered. That he could have been a better man. He didn't have to do what he does, even if Sigmar didn't answer him. He didn't have to rely on Sigmar the way he did. And when his god didn't answer him, throw fairly a giant fit and decide to turn down everything.
I mean, I broadly agree with this. What you're really looking for Archaon is him realizing he's wrong. That's ultimately what you're looking for in terms of the narrative.
No one else could have done it. Like it would have had to be whoever held Galmaraz, whether it would have been Volton or Karl Franz, which bringing back Volton was fucking weird. I don't know why they bothered.
No, neither do I. That made no sense at all.
Waste of a character.
Karl Franz is utter waste.
Yeah, in Storm of Chaos, he made sense. That's because the Karl Franz back then was not the Karl Franz we have now. That was Karl Franz, the weak old man emperor. Who
it wasn't really. It was Karl Franz, the hero riding emperor at that point.
Yeah, but like the whole thing of like, why given the hammer to vault it? Why? Anyway,
no.
But like Archaon, his last moments of life should have been, I was wrong. Because that is critical to, I think, the story of Warhammer is that Chaos duped him.
Yep. And I think that's a necessary component. He was responsible for the deaths of billions, and he was wrong. And having enough, and that was something that the Chaos Gods themselves would revel in. So they would ensure that he had more than enough consciousness to realize just how fucking wrong he was. And that's an essential component to the character. I don't think that walking away from that or allowing it not to transpire is at all wise.
People ask, no, Archaon flat out loses in the end times. Like Sigmar beats him in a really dumb way. I really don't like the way Sigmar beats him, where he uses like weird lightning magic to beat him instead of, just Galmaraz. But Archaon loses and Sigmar knocks him off a cliff. And then Archaon climbs back up the cliff and tackles Sigmar off of it into the abyss. But then somehow like loses Sigmar in the fall because Sigmar ends up falling. Yeah, Sigmar falls all the way to the core of the planet and Archaon just is MIA until he comes back later. It's weird. It's super weird.
It's a bit weird.
But anyway, that's the end of our show.
I'm going to write something epic, but not be sure what I'm going to write. Nice way to end, eh?
Funny enough, it's genuinely hilarious. If you go read Archaon's last moments, he literally just vanishes. There's no explanation what happens to him. He tackles Sigmar into a bottomless pit, and then he's gone.
So, our conclusion, to end. The end times happened. They were a thing. Several books, 10 whole books, discussing something that could have been written significantly better, in our opinion. You may disagree. You may love it. But as far as we're concerned, the end times was an event that is full of really interesting character beats, but they are entirely drowned out by nonsense, sections that make no sense, decisions that betray previous character choices, and rewriting of previous lore, either on purpose because they wanted it to be something new, or in ignorance because they just hadn't done enough reading of some of the previous books. For those of us who are great lovers of lore, for those of us who look at all of Warhammer and where it came from and where it eventually ended, the end times was ultimately largely a disappointment, because instead of being a great celebration of everything that we loved, that really did cap everything off at the top with a great holy shit, that was awesome, instead it crapped at the top and really left us feeling a little bit dirty by the end of it all. We wanted to love it, but we didn't. We wanted to adore it, but we kind of couldn't, because in truth, it wasn't so much that it was celebrating Warhammer from the last 30 years. It was more desperately and sometimes inefficiently attempting to set up Age of Sigmar. And because of the great imposition of new material that had nothing to do with what was going on, you were left confused, unsure, and going, really? Is Lilith all that? How dumb is she? Oh, she's dead. So you can take from this whatever you wish. From our perspective, it could have been better. And I would just like to end with a thank you very much.
Yeah, and hey, CB4N, that is actually a genuinely really cool storyline. Like, what would Ulrika, a Kislevites native who has turned into a vampire, think of running into Mother Ostankia? That's a really fucking cool idea, story-wise. So have fun with that.
Yeah, particularly given that the chap who wrote all of the Ulrika books, Nathan, is a very close friend of mine. I should just ping him.
Yeah, we need to have him on the show at some point. But
yeah,
also, Strix, we appreciate the words. This was not well thought out. just I don't want to lie to you guys.
oh no, it was not well thought out.
Yeah, no. I think me and Andy are both sitting here going like, we did not get nearly as far as we wanted to with this topic.
Before the stream, we were like, we've got a lot of shit to cover. How are we going to do this? Let's just wing it and see where it goes.
I was so excited because Andy was like, man, I've got this whole thing about like what happened to the lizard in the end times. We didn't even get to that part. I was like, all right, fuck it. I guess we'll do it again later. But want to thank you all very much for being here and for watching. Really appreciate everyone. Also make sure that you follow and sub to Andy because like we'll be here every other week.
Oh so we're on my channel just now. Press sub, go on, do it.
Next week is my channel, and then we'll be back on Andy, and then we'll do that. Also, you know, Lawhammer and all that jazz. And hey, if you really like the show, and you want to help support, I have been putting all of these onto oh my gosh, like Spotify and stuff. So there are audio versions of these. I just uploaded Deconstructing Malekith. We're on most the major podcast things. We don't make a lot of money from that though. So if you want to help support, make sure you maybe consider popping over on Patreon for Lawhammer, and just $1 a month helps more than you know. It really does. Like even just $1 a month, guys. Thanks. Or subbing on Twitch or any of those big ways to help support what we do around here. We appreciate it a lot. And make sure you check out the Lawhammer series. It's amazing. I'm going to be streaming. I want to say on, I'm not going to give a date because I'll be lying if I do.
Give a date.
But
you'll go, yes, I'll do that. The date.
Yeah, but I'm going to be, I'm actually going to be watching the first episode here, I think today. And I'm going to be doing a thing about it later this week. So that'll be fun. And, follow us both on Twitch. I'm playing a lot of games. Andy's going to start playing games in the near future. Yes. And if we hit 5,000 subs on Lawhammer, which I think right now we're at like 2.8,
something like that.
If we hit 5K, I will release the Queek Headtaker super YouTube video, which I can already tell you now is going to be over 3 hours long. I've just started doing some work on it, and it's so much. It
may be only a child in terms of age.
I know
he does a fuck ton in his life.
Too many people fucking like him. Honestly, when I'm doing the math of what he does in like 7 years, it is bullshit. Like I get that he's crazy, but like my god, is he busy. But and that's pretty much everything. So thank you all so much for watching. We will have the next poll up on Andy's channel for what we're going to be doing for next week's subject. We'll have that up today probably. And that's it.
I'll end with a quick boost for Inside the Rookery, which is a stream where I and multiple mates who are the bestest, many of whom play Lawhammer, gather every single week on Saturday at 7 p.m. UK time, and we discuss gaming with an insider's view, i.e. how do we make the games that we all know and love? How do they come to pass? How do we edit them? How do we produce them? How do we write them if we're writers? And we've had guests on that channel, we're on season 6 at the moment, that have spanned everything from the creators of Warhammer to the creators of various role-playing games, to our really famous authors, to filmmakers, to computer game writers, ranging from Andy Hall, for example, to people who are behind Vampire the Masquerade as others. We've had pretty much everybody on at one point or another. We have many more guests to come every single Saturday at 7 p.m. UK. Advert time. Call that as Jill.
Yeah, and watch it. I just watched this past Saturday's episode last night. It's fantastic. It's by horror author and games maker. I can't remember his name, but Caleb, and it was fantastic. Had a lot of really, really interesting points, a lot of good things about running roleplay games, creating roleplay games, and dealing with horror. And he actually, one of the things that was fascinating is he put into words why I do not find 40K to be a horrifying setting. And it's really fascinating to realize that it's not a scary setting, and he points out why, and it's really interesting. So go watch that. Okay, we're done.
I think we might be done.
We are not talking about the end times for at least another month. I gotta recharge my battery.
Yeah, end times, end schmimes.
Jesus.
That was good fun, though. Thanks, everyone. Your comments were absolutely brilliant. And I think that we've all come out of this realizing that the end times are a thing that we don't necessarily think shouldn't have happened. Happy with it happening. We just think perhaps it could have been done differently.
And thank you very much for all the super chats and the bits and stuff. Really appreciate that. Thank you.
Really appreciated. Thank you. And on that, bye-bye.